Three men in expensive suits had Olivia Barnes pinned against the booth at DiNapoli's family restaurant, and nobody was doing anything about it. The single father at table 6, the one with paint under his fingernails, who'd been cutting pizza for his 8-year-old daughter, set down his fork and stood up slowly. Jason Reeves wasn't looking for trouble on this Friday evening. This weekly dinner at DiNapoli's had been his tradition with Emma for 3 years now, ever since he'd moved to Oak Ridge after everything fell apart. The red vinyl booths, the smell of fresh garlic bread, and the gentle chatter of families created a cocoon of normalcy that both of them desperately needed. Emma was focused on her coloring book, her small tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully filled in a seahorse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a slightly messy ponytail that Jason had done his best with that morning. Some things you never quite master as a single dad, no matter how hard you try. "Daddy, is the pizza too hot?" Emma asked, looking up from her drawing. Her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, studied him with that perceptive gaze that sometimes caught him off guard. "No, sweetheart, just right." Jason smiled, returning to the careful task of cutting her pepperoni pizza into perfect triangles. His hands were rough and calloused, a plumber's hands that fixed pipes and unclogged drains by day, but still managed to be gentle enough to braid hair and bandage scraped knees. He'd positioned them at table 6 deliberately, back to the wall, clear view of both entrances. Old habits from his previous life. Emma thought it was just another of Daddy's quirks, like how he always checked the locks twice before bed, or how he could hear the slightest unusual sound in the middle of the night. "Remember what I taught you about sitting in restaurants?" Jason asked, glancing around the Friday night crowd. Emma nodded seriously. "Always know where the exits are, and watch people's hands, not their faces." She recited it like a schoolroom lesson, then immediately returned to her coloring. To her, these little safety lessons were just games they played, not the survival tactics that had kept her father alive in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. The restaurant was filled with its usual Friday crowd, families celebrating the end of the work week, couples on dates, a few lone diners enjoying plates of pasta. The waitstaff moved efficiently between tables, balancing plates and refilling drinks. Normal people living normal lives. The kind of life Jason had been trying to build for himself and Emma since hanging up his uniform. "Daddy, do you think Mom would like my seahorse?" Emma asked suddenly, holding up her coloring book. The question caught Jason off guard, as mentions of Laura often did. 3 years hadn't made her absence any easier to navigate. "She'd love it, kiddo. Blue was her favorite color." He reached across to squeeze her small hand. "And she always said you were her little artist." Emma beamed, returning to her coloring with renewed purpose. These moments when Laura's memory brought joy rather than pain were becoming more frequent, a healing that happened one small moment at a time. The bell above the door chimed, drawing Jason's attention. A young woman entered, glancing nervously around the restaurant. She was in her early 30s, professionally dressed in a well-worn blazer and pencil skirt that suggested practical rather than expensive taste. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she carried a leather messenger bag that had seen better days. What caught Jason's attention wasn't her appearance, but her behavior. She checked her phone repeatedly, glancing toward the door every few seconds. Her shoulders were tense, and when the hostess showed her to a booth, she requested one with a view of the entrance. The woman ordered coffee but didn't touch it, instead scanning the restaurant with the kind of hyper-awareness Jason recognized all too well. Someone expecting trouble, someone who knew they were being watched. "Daddy, why does that lady look scared?" Emma whispered, her crayon pausing over the seahorse's tail. Emma had her mother's intuition, that uncanny ability to read people that both blessed and cursed the women in Jason's life. "Sometimes grown-ups have worries, sweetheart," Jason said softly, cutting another piece of pizza for his daughter. "Just like how you worry about math tests, but bigger." He kept his voice calm, reassuring, but his eyes continued their systematic sweep of the restaurant. A flicker of movement caught his attention as 3 men in expensive suits walked in. They didn't bother waiting to be seated, moving with purpose toward the nervous woman's table. Everything about their body language screamed trouble. The leader was built like a linebacker, with graying temples and hands that had seen violence. His companions flanked him with practiced ease, cutting off the woman's escape routes. Jason felt his muscles tense, his breathing automatically shifting to the controlled rhythm he'd learned during training. "Miss Barnes," the leader said, his voice carrying a quiet menace that made other conversations falter. "You've been avoiding our calls." The woman's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down, her face pale but defiant. "I told you people I'm not interested," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Find another lawyer." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He slid into the booth across from her uninvited, while his companions remained standing, blocking her in. Jason's grip tightened on his fork, every instinct screaming at him to move. But Emma was right there, and he'd sworn never to let violence touch her world again. "See, that's where you're wrong, counselor," the man continued, his tone conversational but loaded with threat. "You don't get to walk away from Maxwell Grant. Not when you know what you know." He leaned forward, and the woman instinctively pressed back against the booth. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw from the Reynolds case. You're going to forget everything you think you discovered, and you're going to go back to handling divorce cases and parking tickets like a good little lawyer." The ceramic plate hit the wall inches from the woman's face before anyone could react, white fragments scattering across the red vinyl seat. One of the men had swept it off the table in a casual display of violence, and now all three were leaning over her, their voices dropping to harsh whispers that carried more menace than shouts ever could. Other patrons were starting to leave, sensing the danger but unwilling to get involved. The waitress had disappeared behind the counter, probably calling the police, but Jason knew they wouldn't arrive in time. "Daddy," Emma's voice was small, confused, her crayon frozen over the coloring book. "That lady is scared, like when I have nightmares and you come to make the monsters go away." Jason looked at his daughter's wide eyes, saw the concern creeping in, and something inside him clicked into place. He'd retired from the teams to give Emma a normal life, to protect her from the darkness he'd lived in for 8 years. But sometimes protecting innocence meant embracing violence one more time. "Stay here and keep coloring, Emma," he said quietly. "Daddy needs to help someone." Emmy nodded solemnly, understanding in her eyes beyond her years. "Be careful, Daddy." Jason stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet restaurant. The men at the woman's table hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on intimidating their target, but the woman's eyes found his across the room. She saw something there that made her breath catch. Not the mild-mannered plumber who always said please and thank you, but something harder, more dangerous, something that had been sleeping for 3 years and was now fully awake. "Excuse me," Jason said, his voice carrying clearly across the restaurant. The three men turned toward him, and their leader's expression shifted from annoyance to calculation as he took in Jason's work clothes, his paint-stained hands, his utterly ordinary appearance. "Mind your own business, pal," the leader said dismissively. "This is a private conversation." But something in Jason's stillness, in the way he held himself, made the man's companions shift nervously. They were hired muscle, probably ex-military themselves, and they recognized something in Jason's bearing that civilian eyes missed. "I am minding my business," Jason replied, taking a step closer. "My business is making sure my daughter can finish her dinner in peace. Your business seems to be scaring people. I think we have a conflict of interest." His voice remained calm, conversational, but there was steel underneath that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. The leader stood up, all 6'4" of him, probably expecting the slight plumber to back down. Instead, Jason moved with fluid precision, closing the distance between them in 3 steps. What happened next took exactly 15 seconds, but it unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance of controlled violence. Jason's hand shot out, grabbed the leader's wrist, and twisted with surgical precision. The crack of bone echoed through the restaurant as the man's arm bent at an impossible angle. Before the leader hit the ground, Jason had already moved to the second man, using his momentum to drive an elbow into the man's solar plexus. The attacker folded like a house of cards, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The third man reached for something inside his jacket, but Jason was already there, his hand clamping down on the man's wrist with enough force to make him drop whatever he'd been reaching for. A gentle push sent him stumbling backward into an empty table, hands raised in surrender. The entire restaurant fell silent, except for the groaning of the 2 men on the floor and the soft scratch of Emma's crayon against paper. Jason straightened his work shirt and walked back to his table as if nothing had happened. But his eyes never left the three men. The leader was struggling to his feet, cradling his broken wrist, his face a mask of pain and rage. "This isn't over," he snarled. But Jason just looked at him with the kind of cold patience that spoke of deeper violence held in check. "Yes, it is," Jason said simply. "You're going to leave now. You're going to forget about Miss Barnes. And if I see you or anyone like you bothering innocent people in my town again, we'll have another conversation. Trust me, you won't enjoy that one as much as I will." The quiet authority in his voice made the leader take an involuntary step backward. The three men limped toward the exit, the leader pausing only to glare back at Jason with the kind of hatred that promised future violence. But Jason had seen that look before in a dozen different countries, from 100 different enemies. It didn't scare him anymore. What scared him was the way Emma was looking at him now, her coloring book forgotten, her young mind trying to process what she'd just witnessed. "My daddy was in the Navy," Emma announced to the room, her voice matter-of-fact in the way only children could manage. "He protected people from bad guys, like on TV but real." She went back to coloring her seahorse as if her father dismantling three armed men was just another Friday night occurrence. Olivia Barnes sat in her booth, staring at Jason with an expression that mixed gratitude, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. Her hands were no longer shaking, but her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the quiet man who ordered extra napkins for his daughter with the precision instrument of violence she just witnessed. "Thank you," she called out softly. But Jason was already back at his table, cutting pizza for Emma as if the last 2 minutes had never happened. Other patrons were slowly returning to their conversations. The immediate danger passed, but an undercurrent of tension remained. People were looking at Jason differently now, seeing past the work clothes and paint-stained hands to something harder underneath. Jason could feel their stares, could sense the shift in how people perceived him, and it made his chest tight with familiar anxiety. This was exactly what he'd tried to avoid when he'd moved to Oak Ridge, exactly why he'd chosen the most ordinary job he could find. He wanted to be nobody special, just another single dad trying to raise his daughter in peace. But violence had a way of following him, and now his carefully constructed normal life felt as fragile as the ceramic plate that had started this whole mess. "Daddy, are you okay?" Emma asked, her small hand reaching across the table to touch his. Her concern was genuine, immediate, and it reminded Jason why he'd given up everything that made him who he was. This little girl with her mother's eyes and her endless capacity for love was worth any sacrifice, any loss of identity. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, just making sure everyone could enjoy their dinner. But as he looked around the restaurant, seeing the mixture of fear and fascination in people's faces, Jason knew that his quiet life in Oak Ridge had just become infinitely more complicated. Olivia Barnes was still sitting in her booth, her untouched coffee now cold, her phone buzzing with what were probably more threats from whoever had sent those men. She kept looking at Jason as if trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The police arrived 20 minutes later, but the three men were long gone, and the restaurant security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the crucial 15 seconds. Jason gave a statement that was technically true but revealed nothing about his background, describing himself as a concerned citizen who'd intervened when he saw someone being threatened. The officers were skeptical, but had no choice but to accept his version of events, especially when every witness corroborated his story. As the police wrapped up their investigation, Olivia approached Jason's table. Emma had finished her seahorse and moved on to a dolphin, her artistic focus unbroken by the evening's excitement. Jason tensed as Olivia drew near, every instinct telling him to keep his distance, to maintain the walls he'd built around his new life. "I want to thank you properly," Olivia said, her voice low enough that Emma wouldn't overhear. "What you did tonight, those men weren't just making idle threats. They're connected to some very dangerous people, and what you just did probably saved my life." She paused, studying his face. "But I'm guessing you already knew that." Jason met her gaze steadily, seeing intelligence there, and determination that reminded him of another strong woman from his past. "I saw someone in trouble," he said simply. "I couldn't just sit there." But something in Olivia's expression made him uneasy, as if she was seeing more than he wanted to reveal. You moved like military, Olivia continued, ignoring his attempt to deflect. Not just any military, special forces, probably Navy, given what your daughter said. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I've represented enough veterans to recognize the signs. The question is, what's a former Navy SEAL doing working as a plumber in Oak Ridge, Iowa? Jason's blood ran cold. This woman was dangerous in a completely different way than the men he'd just faced. Dangerous because she was smart enough to see through his carefully constructed facade. I think you're letting your imagination run away with you, he said carefully. I fix pipes and raise my daughter. That's all. But Olivia wasn't deterred. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, setting it on the table between them. Those men tonight work for Maxwell Grant. He's trying to cover up a defense contracting scandal that goes deeper than you can imagine. People have died to keep this secret, and more will die if someone doesn't stop it. She met his eyes again. I could use someone with your particular skill set. I'm not interested, Jason said firmly, but he didn't push the card away. My fighting days are over. I have more important responsibilities now. He glanced at Emma, who was adding intricate details to her dolphin's fins, completely absorbed in her art. Captain Daniel Barnes, Olivia said quietly, and Jason's entire world seemed to tilt sideways. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging up memories he'd spent 3 years trying to bury. Barnes had been his commanding officer in Afghanistan, a man of absolute integrity who died trying to protect his team from an ambush that should never have happened. How do you know that name? Jason's voice was barely a whisper, but the intensity behind it made Olivia take a half step back. She'd obviously hit something important, but the pain in Jason's eyes made her regret her tactics. Because Captain Barnes was my father, Olivia said softly. And according to his final mission report, he died saving the life of Petty Officer Jason Reeves and his entire team. He died because someone sold faulty equipment to the military. The same someone I've been investigating for the past 6 months. The coloring book slipped from Emma's fingers as she looked up at the two adults, sensing the shift in emotional temperature. Jason felt like the walls of the restaurant were closing in, the careful barriers he'd built around his new life crumbling with each word Olivia spoke. Captain Barnes had been more than his commanding officer. He'd been a mentor, a father figure, the man who'd taught him that true strength came from protecting others, not destroying enemies. Daddy? Emma's voice was small, concerned, and it snapped Jason back to the present. Whatever ghost Olivia had awakened would have to wait. His daughter needed him here now, in this moment, not lost in the shadows of his past. We should go, Jason said, standing abruptly and reaching for his wallet. But Olivia's hand caught his wrist, and the contact sent an electric shock through both of them. Her grip was firm, desperate, and when he looked into her eyes, he saw the same determination that had driven her father to make the ultimate sacrifice. Please, she whispered. I know this is a lot to process, but I need your help. My father died believing he was protecting something important, and I've spent 6 months trying to figure out what that was. The Reynolds case, the one those men want me to drop, it's connected to his death. Maxwell Grant supplied the defective body armor that failed my father's unit. If I can prove it, I can finally give him justice. Jason closed his eyes, feeling the weight of old promises and new responsibilities crushing down on him. He'd sworn to Captain Barnes that he'd use his skills to protect the innocent, but he'd also sworn to Emma that he'd never leave her the way her mother had. The two promises felt incompatible, pulling him in directions that threatened to tear him apart. I can't, he said finally, his voice heavy with regret. I have Emma to think about. I won't risk leaving her alone. But even as he said the words, he could feel his resolve weakening. Captain Barnes had died for him, had taken a bullet meant for Jason's chest, and that debt had been eating at him for 3 years. Olivia seemed to understand his internal struggle. She looked at Emma, who was watching them with the kind of adult perception that some children develop too early, and her expression softened. What if there was a way to keep her safe while you help me? I have resources, protection, ways to make sure nothing happens to your daughter. No, Jason said firmly. But his hand unconsciously moved to the spot where Captain Barnes's dog tags hung beneath his shirt. He'd worn them every day since the funeral, a reminder of the man who'd saved his life, and the promise he'd made over a flag-draped coffin. I won't put her at risk. Not for anything. Emma slipped out of her side of the booth and moved to stand beside her father, her small hand finding his. Daddy, is the scared lady Captain Barnes's daughter? She asked, her 8-year-old mind cutting straight to the heart of the matter. The Captain Barnes you tell me stories about? Jason knelt down to Emma's level, his hands settling on her small shoulders. Yes, sweetheart, but those are just stories. This is real life, and real life is more complicated. He could see the wheels turning in her head, could see her mother's intelligence shining through those dark eyes. But you always say Captain Barnes was a hero, Emma continued, her voice serious beyond her years. And heroes help people, right? Even when it's scary. She looked at Olivia with the kind of direct assessment that only children could manage. Are you trying to be a hero like your daddy? Olivia's breath caught, and for a moment her composed exterior cracked, revealing the grief and determination underneath. I'm trying, she said honestly, but I can't do it alone. And your daddy is the only person who can help me finish what my father started. Jason felt the familiar weight of command decisions, the crushing responsibility of choices that would ripple through multiple lives. Every instinct told him to grab Emma and run, to disappear into the American heartland, where neither Olivia Barnes nor Maxwell Grant could find them. But Captain Barnes's voice echoed in his memory, reminding him that some fights were worth the risk, that protecting the innocent sometimes meant standing in harm's way. If I help you, Jason said slowly, and I'm not saying I will, what exactly are we talking about? What would you need me to do? He held up a hand to stop her from speaking. And don't lie to me or sugarcoat it. If you want my help, you tell me everything, the whole truth, no matter how ugly it gets. Olivia glanced at Emma, uncertain about how much to reveal in front of a child. But Jason shook his head. She stays with me. Whatever you have to say, she'll hear eventually anyway. At least this way I can explain it to her properly. It was a test, Jason realized, a way to gauge how serious Olivia was about involving him in her crusade. Maxwell Grant runs a defense contracting company called Grant Defense, Olivia began, her voice taking on the clinical tone of a prosecutor laying out a case. For the past 5 years, they've been supplying body armor to military units overseas. The armor looks good on paper, passes all the basic tests, but it fails under real combat conditions. Your unit wasn't the first to be hit by defective equipment, and it won't be the last unless someone stops them. Jason's jaw tightened as the implications sank in. How many? He asked quietly. How many soldiers have died because of this? At least 47, confirmed. Probably more, Olivia replied, her voice heavy with the weight of those numbers. My father started investigating when he noticed patterns in casualty reports, equipment failures that didn't make sense. He was building a case, gathering evidence, but he died before he could complete it. The official investigation was shut down, all his files classified or destroyed. Except you have copies, Jason guessed, seeing the determined set of Olivia's shoulders. She nodded, reaching into her purse to pull out a small flash drive. My father was paranoid about security. He kept backup files hidden in places the military investigators didn't think to look. I've spent months piecing together his research, following the paper trail, building a case that can finally bring Grant down. But every time I get close, someone tries to stop me. Tonight wasn't the first attempt to scare me off. Emma had been listening intently, her young mind processing information that would have overwhelmed most adults. So the bad man is hurting soldiers like Captain Barnes, she asked, her voice small but fierce. And Miss Olivia wants to stop him? That's right, sweetheart, Jason said gently. But stopping bad people can be dangerous work. That's why Daddy doesn't want to get involved. But even as he said it, Jason could feel his resistance crumbling. The thought of other soldiers dying because of Grant's greed, other families destroyed because he'd chosen safety over justice, was eating at him like acid. But Daddy, Emma said with the devastating logic of childhood, if you don't help, more soldiers will die, right? And that would make Captain Barnes sad. She looked up at him with eyes that held too much wisdom for her age. Mommy always said that doing the right thing is scary, but that's why it's right, because it's hard. Jason closed his eyes, feeling the walls of his carefully constructed new life crumbling around him. Emma was right, and Olivia was right, and somewhere in the darkness beyond death, Captain Barnes was probably right too. But that didn't make the choice any easier, didn't reduce the risk to the one person in the world who mattered more to him than his own life. "If I do this," he said finally, opening his eyes to meet Olivia's hopeful gaze, "we do it my way. No heroics, no unnecessary risks, and Emma's safety comes first. The moment I think she's in danger, I'm out. No arguments, no negotiations, just gone. Are we clear?" Olivia nodded eagerly, relief flooding her features. "Crystal clear. I have a safe house, protection detail, everything we need to keep her secure while we work." She paused, studying his face. "But I have to ask, why did you really leave the teams? Men like you don't usually retire to become plumbers in small-town Iowa." Jason was quiet for a long moment, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the spot where his wedding ring used to sit. "Emma's mother died 3 years ago," he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Cancer. I was deployed when it happened. Couldn't get back in time to say goodbye. I realized that all my training, all my skills, they meant nothing if I couldn't protect the people I loved most. So I got out, moved here, tried to give Emma the normal life her mother wanted for her." Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes, and with it came a deep respect for the sacrifice Jason had made. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been." She glanced at Emma, who was pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. "But maybe this is a chance to honor both their memories. Your wife and my father, they'd both want us to stop other families from going through what we've been through." Jason looked around DiNapoli's family restaurant, at the place where he'd tried to build a new life, tried to become someone ordinary and safe. The other patrons were still stealing glances at him, whispering among themselves about the quiet plumber who'd moved like a weapon. His cover was blown, his anonymity shattered, and there was no going back to the simple life he'd tried to create. "All right," he said finally, the words feeling like stepping off a cliff into unknown darkness. "I'll help you, but first, I need to make arrangements for Emma. She'll need somewhere safe to stay while we work." He looked down at his daughter, who was watching him with a mixture of pride and concern that broke his heart. "Actually," Olivia said carefully, "I was thinking she could stay with us. I have a house outside town, good security, and I've been living alone since my father died. It might be safer if we all stayed together, at least until this is over." She met Emma's curious gaze. "I could use some company anyway. It gets pretty lonely working on cases by yourself." Emma perked up at this suggestion, her natural sociability overcoming her initial shyness. "Do you have cable TV?" she asked seriously, as if this was the most important factor in the decision. "And can I bring my art supplies?" "Cable TV, high-speed internet, and the biggest art room you've ever seen," Olivia replied with a smile that was genuine for the first time all evening. "I used to paint before law school, never had time to set up a proper studio, but I kept all the supplies." Jason felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the iron control he'd maintained for 3 years. Maybe this was what Captain Barnes had been trying to teach him all along. That strength wasn't about standing alone against the darkness, but about finding the right people to stand with. Maybe it was time to stop running from who he was and start figuring out who he could become. "Okay," he said, the decision feeling both terrifying and liberating. "We'll do this together. But first I need to know everything about Maxwell Grant, his organization, and exactly what kind of evidence you have. If we're going to take down a defense contractor, we need to be absolutely certain of our facts." Olivia's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face and making her look years younger. "I have everything we need," she said, patting her purse where the flash drive waited. "Financial records, correspondence, test results, casualty reports, everything my father died trying to expose. With your help, we can finally bring these people to justice." As they prepared to leave DiNapoli's family restaurant, Jason caught sight of their reflection in the window. A single father, a determined lawyer, and a little girl with paint-stained fingers, walking into an uncertain future together. It wasn't the family he'd planned, wasn't the life he'd tried to build, but maybe it was exactly what all three of them needed. Outside in the parking lot, Olivia's phone buzzed with another threatening text message. Jason read it over her shoulder, his expression hardening as he recognized the kind of intimidation tactics he'd seen in a dozen different countries. Maxwell Grant wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He was someone who understood violence and wasn't afraid to use it. They'll escalate now, Jason said quietly, making sure Emma couldn't overhear. Tonight was a warning. Tomorrow, they'll start playing for keeps. He looked at Olivia. Seriously, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. People like Grant don't forgive, and they don't forget. Olivia's expression hardened, and for a moment, Jason could see the steel that had driven her father to make the ultimate sacrifice. They killed him, she said simply. My father died because he tried to protect soldiers from faulty equipment, and they covered it up. If I don't finish what he started, then he died for nothing. Jason nodded, understanding completely. Some fights were worth the risk. Some promises transcended personal safety. As they walked toward their cars, he felt the familiar weight of mission planning settling over him, the methodical preparation for a battle that would test everything he'd learned in 8 years of special operations. Miss Olivia? Emma's voice piped up from between them. Are you going to be like family now? The question was innocent, direct, and it stopped both adults in their tracks. Jason realized that his daughter, in her simple way, had cut straight to the heart of what they were really doing. They weren't just pursuing justice for Captain Barnes. They were creating something new, something that might fill the holes that loss had carved in all their lives. I'd like that very much, Olivia said softly, kneeling down to Emma's level. I never had a little sister before. It might be fun. Emma's face lit up with the kind of pure joy that only children could manage, and Jason felt something that had been frozen inside him for 3 years begin to thaw. As they drove through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge toward Olivia's house, Jason caught himself thinking about the future for the first time since his wife's death. Not just survival, not just getting through each day, but actually building something worth protecting. Captain Barnes had saved his life in Afghanistan, but maybe Olivia Barnes was going to save something even more important. Maybe she was going to help him remember how to live. The safe house turned out to be a converted farmhouse 10 miles outside town, surrounded by enough open ground to spot trouble coming from any direction. Jason approved of the security measures Olivia had implemented, the discreet cameras and motion sensors that would alert them to any approach. She'd obviously learned from her father's military background, understanding that preparation was the difference between success and disaster. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the kind of comfortable furniture that invited people to relax and stay a while. Emma immediately claimed the art room Olivia had mentioned, her eyes wide with delight at the easels and canvases and tubes of paint arranged on shelves like a rainbow of possibilities. This is even better than our art class at school, Emma exclaimed, running her fingers over the different brushes lined up neatly in mason jars. Can I really use any of this? Absolutely, Olivia replied with a genuine smile. They've just been sitting here gathering dust. Art supplies should be used, not stored. Jason watched the interaction from the doorway, taking in the unexpected gentleness in Olivia's manner with Emma. It was a side of her he hadn't expected. The tough lawyer who'd confronted dangerous men, without flinching, now patiently showing his daughter how to set up an easel. While Emma settled in with her art supplies, Jason and Olivia retreated to a small study off the main living room. The walls were lined with law books and military histories, an unexpected combination that suddenly made perfect sense. The desk was organized meticulously, with files stacked in precise order. Coffee, Olivia offered, gesturing to a small coffee maker in the corner. I have a feeling we'll be needing it. Thanks, Jason nodded, still assessing the room with the careful eye of someone trained to notice details. A framed photograph on the desk caught his attention. A younger Olivia in graduation robes, standing beside a tall man in dress blues, his captain's bars gleaming in the sunlight. The resemblance between father and daughter was striking. Same determined jaw, same penetrating gaze. That was my law school graduation, Olivia said, following his gaze. The last time I saw him before. Her voice trailed off, the wound still raw despite the years. Jason picked up the photo, studying the face of the man who'd saved his life. He was proud of you. I could see it every time he mentioned you. He talked about me? Olivia looked up, surprise evident in her expression. All the time, Jason confirmed with a small smile. Said his daughter was going to change the world someday. Make it better. Fairer. He set the photo down carefully. He was right. Olivia busied herself with the coffee, using the moment to collect herself. When she turned back, her professional demeanor had returned, though her eyes still held the emotion of moments before. "We should talk about what we're up against," she said, setting a steaming mug in front of Jason. "Maxwell Grant isn't just any defense contractor. He's politically connected, wealthy beyond imagination, and absolutely ruthless." She pulled out her laptop and opened it on the desk between them. Grant Defense Technologies, founded 15 years ago, started small with basic equipment contracts, then expanded rapidly after winning several major Pentagon deals. She pulled up a photo of Maxwell Grant, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He lives in a $30 million mansion outside D.C., has 3 ex-wives, donates heavily to both political parties, and sits on the boards of a dozen influential think tanks. Olivia clicked through several images. Grant shaking hands with senators, standing on yachts, speaking at galas. Jason studied the man's face, noting the cold calculation behind the practiced smile. Military background? Former Army officer, Olivia confirmed. Discharged 20 years ago under circumstances that were quietly swept under the rug. My father was somehow involved, though I haven't been able to find the complete records. She switched to another screen showing financial data. Grant Defense has government contracts worth billions. Body armor is just one division of their operation, but it's been their most profitable for the past 5 years. Jason leaned forward, scanning the numbers. And they're cutting corners to maximize profits. Classic. Exactly, Olivia nodded. They developed a new type of lightweight armor that promised the same protection at half the weight. The military was eager to reduce the load on soldiers, so they fast-tracked approval. Jason's jaw tightened as memories flooded back. We were told the new armor was revolutionary, that we were lucky to get it before the regular infantry. The tests were falsified, Olivia said quietly, pulling up a series of documents. Internal memos show they knew the armor failed under certain conditions, but they buried those results and only submitted the favorable ones to the Pentagon. She hesitated, then clicked to another document. This is the incident report from your unit's ambush in Afghanistan. The official story is that you encountered unexpected resistance and were outgunned. No mention of equipment failure. Jason's expression darkened as he skimmed the report. That's not what happened. We were pinned down for hours. The first round that hit Martinez went straight through his chest plate like it wasn't even there. Same with Rodriguez and Patel. The armor just failed. "And my father?" Olivia asked, her voice carefully controlled. Jason closed his eyes, the memory crystal clear, despite the years. "We were trying to reach the extraction point. Your father was leading from the front, as always. 2 of our guys were wounded. I was helping carry Martinez when a sniper targeted us. His hand unconsciously moved to his chest, to the spot where the bullet should have struck. Your father saw it coming somehow. He pushed me down and took the hit meant for me. His armor failed too." The room fell silent as Olivia absorbed this information, details she'd never heard about her father's final moments. "He didn't die right away," Jason continued, his voice quiet. "He pulled me closer, told me something was wrong with our equipment, said I needed to find out what happened, that it wasn't just bad luck." Jason looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze. "His last words were about you. He said to tell his daughter he was sorry he wouldn't make it to her birthday." Olivia turned away, her shoulders rigid as she fought for composure. When she spoke again, her voice was steady through sheer force of will. "That's why this case matters so much. It's not just about justice for my father or your teammates. It's about the soldiers who are still wearing this armor today, still dying because of Grant's greed." Jason nodded, understanding completely. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about honoring the oath they'd all taken to never leave a comrade behind. "So what's your plan?" he asked, shifting the conversation back to practical matters, giving Olivia the space to regain her composure. She turned back to her laptop, grateful for the redirect. "I've been building a case against Grant Defense through the Reynolds lawsuit. Thomas Reynolds was a Marine killed in Syria last year. His widow hired me after reading about my father's death and suspecting a connection. She pulled up a file of legal documents. I've been gathering evidence, following the money, interviewing former employees. 3 weeks ago, I finally got a breakthrough. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. My father kept a personal journal encrypted on this drive. It took me months to crack the password. Jason leaned forward with interest. What did he find? Notes about inconsistent test results, names of potential whistleblowers, and something called Project Ares. He seemed particularly concerned about that, but the notes are fragmentary. He was being careful, even in his encrypted files. Project Ares, Jason repeated, the name triggering something in his memory. I've heard that before. One of Grant's men mentioned it tonight at the restaurant. Olivia's eyes widened. You're sure? Positive. When the leader was threatening you, he said something like, especially with Ares at stake. Jason's expression grew concerned. If they're worried enough to send men after you in public, you must be getting close to something important. Olivia was about to respond when her phone buzzed with an incoming text. Her face paled as she read it. What is it? Jason asked, instantly alert. She turned the phone so he could see the screen. The message contained only 3 words in a photo. Back off, Barnes. The image showed Olivia and Jason at DiNapoli's earlier that evening, speaking at her booth after the confrontation. They're watching us, Jason said grimly, and they know we're working together now. He took the phone, examining the photo carefully. This was taken from inside the restaurant, from the bar area. There was another man there, not part of the initial group. Olivia took back her phone, scrolling through recent messages. This isn't the first threat. They've been escalating over the past week ever since I filed discovery motions in the Reynolds case. Jason moved to the window, scanning the darkened landscape around the farmhouse. Your security is good, but not good enough if Grant gets serious. We need to assume they're already trying to locate us. He turned back to Olivia. Tell me about these former employees you've contacted. Anyone who might actually have documentation of the test failures? Dr. Rachel Winters, Olivia replied immediately. She was a materials scientist at Grant Defense until 6 months ago, left suddenly without explanation. She's been dodging my calls, but last week she finally agreed to meet me tomorrow. Said she had documentation that would blow the whole thing open. Jason nodded, already formulating a plan. That's our next move then. But first, he paused as a memory surfaced, something important he needed to check. He moved to the doorway, calling down the hall. Emma, can you come here for a minute, sweetheart? Emma appeared moments later, her fingers smudged with blue paint. Yes, Daddy? Jason knelt down to her level. Remember when I taught you about cars? About looking for anything that doesn't belong? Emma nodded seriously. Like the time you found that tracker under Mrs. Peterson's car when you were fixing her pipes. Jason smiled at the memory. Exactly. I need to check something on Olivia's car. Want to help? Emma's face lit up at being included in grown-up work. Can I use the flashlight? Absolutely. The 3 of them headed outside to where Olivia's sedan was parked. Jason methodically examined the vehicle, starting with the wheel wells and working his way underneath with Emma holding the flashlight. Olivia watched with growing concern as he carefully traced every line and connection. There, Jason said finally, pointing to a small, black device magnetically attached to the undercarriage. That's not part of your car. Is that how they knew where I was going? Olivia asked, a chill running down her spine. Jason nodded, carefully removing the device. Military grade, not something you buy at a spy shop. He examined it closely before slipping it into his pocket. We'll dispose of it properly later. For now, let's get back inside. Once they were back in the study, Emma returned to her art room, and Jason's expression turned serious. They're tracking you professionally. This isn't just intimidation anymore. They want to know your movements, your contacts. Olivia sank into a chair, the full implications hitting her. So they know where we are right now. Possibly, Jason conceded. Though your security measures are good enough that they'd need more than just the tracker's location to plan an effective assault. But we should assume this location is compromised and plan accordingly. He began pacing the room, the tactical part of his brain fully engaged now. We need to reach Dr. Winters before they realize we found the tracker. We'll leave at dawn, but not in your car. I'll have a friend bring us a clean vehicle. You have friends who can provide untraceable cars on short notice? Olivia asked, raising an eyebrow. Jason gave a small, humorless smile. You'd be surprised what skills transfer from military to civilian life. He paused, studying her. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Olivia didn't move, instead watching Jason with a thoughtful expression. Why did you really get out, Jason? You were career military, on track for advancement. Something doesn't add up. Jason was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to share. Finally, he sighed, sinking into the chair across from her. Laura, Emma's mother, was diagnosed while I was deployed. By the time they told me, it was already stage 4. I got emergency leave, but... He shook his head, the memory still painful. I missed saying goodbye by 6 hours. I'm so sorry, Olivia said softly. Emma was 5, Jason continued, his voice hollow. Too young to understand why Mommy was gone, why Daddy wasn't there when it happened. When I finally got home, she wouldn't even look at me for days. He stared down at his hands, calloused and strong, useless against the enemy that had taken his wife. I realized then that all my training, all the missions and medals, meant nothing if I couldn't be there for the people who needed me most. He looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze. So I got out, moved us here where Laura grew up, learned a trade that would let me be home every night, and tried to give Emma the stability she deserved. And became a plumber, Olivia said, not as a question, but as a statement of understanding. Jason nodded. Turns out fixing things is fixing things. Whether it's a tactical situation or a leaky faucet, the stakes are just different. Until tonight, Olivia observed quietly. Until tonight, Jason agreed. He stood, ending the conversation. Get some sleep, counselor. We move at dawn. Olivia rose as well, but paused at the doorway. Sometimes we have to stop running from who we are to move forward, she said. I've been running from my father's death for years, trying to be the lawyer he wanted me to be while ignoring the truth he died for. Maybe we both need to stop running. Jason watched her walk away, her words echoing in his mind. She was right, of course. He'd been running from his past, from his training, from the man he'd been before Laura's death. But running hadn't brought peace, just a different kind of emptiness. Later that night, after checking on Emma, who had fallen asleep surrounded by her art supplies, Jason stood at the window of his assigned bedroom, scanning the darkness beyond. Old habits. He'd positioned Emma's room between his and Olivia's, with both adults positioned to intercept any threat that might come from either direction. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. Checking it, he found a message from a number he hadn't seen in years. Heard you're back in the game. Watch your 6, T. Tom Davis, former teammate, former friend, the last person Jason expected to hear from after 3 years of silence. He considered responding, but decided against it. How had Tom even known? The SEAL community was tight, but not that tight. Someone was talking, which meant someone was watching. The sensation of being targeted again was both familiar and unwelcome. Jason checked his weapon, a 9mm he'd retrieved from a locked case in his truck, and placed it on the nightstand within easy reach. Tomorrow would bring answers, but also more questions. And danger. He thought of Emma sleeping peacefully down the hall, of the promise he'd made to Laura to keep their daughter safe. Was he breaking that promise by getting involved in Olivia's crusade? Or was he fulfilling a deeper promise? To live with honor, to protect the innocent, to finish what Captain Barnes had started. Jason didn't sleep much that night, his mind cycling through scenarios, contingencies, escape routes. By dawn, he had a plan, not a perfect one, but better than nothing. A soft knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Olivia, already dressed and alert despite the early hour. Your friend is here with the car, she said, and I just got a text from Dr. Winters. She wants to meet earlier than planned, says she's nervous, thinks she's being watched. She probably is, Jason replied grimly. Let's move. After ensuring Emma was still asleep and leaving detailed instructions with Olivia's security team, they drove away from the farmhouse in a nondescript sedan provided by Jason's mysterious contact. The morning sun was just beginning to crest the horizon, painting the countryside in hues of gold and amber. Dr. Winters is meeting us at a coffee shop in Cedar Rapids, Olivia explained as Jason drove, taking a deliberately circuitous route to ensure they weren't being followed. It's public enough to be safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. Jason nodded, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Tell me about her. What's her angle in all this? She was the lead materials scientist on the body armor project, Olivia explained. According to my sources, she raised concerns about inconsistent test results, but was overruled by management. 6 months ago, she resigned without notice. No exit interview, no goodbye party, just cleared out her desk and disappeared. Until she contacted you, Jason observed. She reached out after seeing news coverage of the Reynolds lawsuit, Olivia confirmed, said she had documentation that would corroborate my claims, but she was scared. Wanted assurances about anonymity, witness protection, the works. Jason's expression turned thoughtful. If she has what you think she has, she's right to be scared. Grant wouldn't hesitate to silence her permanently. The drive to Cedar Rapids took longer than usual with Jason's evasive routing, but they arrived at the coffee shop, a small, independent place called Brood Awakening, just before 8. The morning rush hadn't started yet, and only a few patrons occupied the tables. That's her, Olivia whispered, nodding toward a nervous-looking woman in her 40s sitting in the corner booth. Doctor. Rachel Winters had the appearance of someone who hadn't slept in days. Rumpled clothes, dark circles under her eyes, fingers that couldn't stop fidgeting with her coffee cup. Jason hung back, positioning himself at a table with a clear view of both the entrance and Dr. Winters, while Olivia approached the scientist. From his vantage point, he could see but not hear their conversation. The scientist appeared agitated, constantly glancing toward the door, her hands shaking as she slid a USB drive across the table to Olivia. Whatever she was saying had Olivia leaning forward intently, her expression growing more serious by the second. Jason watched as Olivia pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes, occasionally asking questions that made Dr. Winters look even more nervous. 20 minutes into their conversation, Jason noticed a man enter the coffee shop. There was nothing overtly suspicious about him. Business casual attire, laptop bag, the look of a regular morning commuter stopping for caffeine. But something about the way he scanned the room, the deliberate casualness of his movements, triggered Jason's internal alarm. He shifted slightly, angling himself to keep both the newcomer and the women in his line of sight. The man ordered a coffee and took a seat at a table with a clear view of Dr. Winters. Too clear, too deliberate. Jason pulled out his phone, texting Olivia. Possible hostel at 2 o'clock. Wrap it up casually. Meet at exit in 2 minutes. He saw Olivia check her phone discreetly, her expression never changing as she continued her conversation with Dr. Winters. Professional? Good. But before they could enact their exit strategy, Dr. Winters suddenly stood, gathering her things hurriedly. She said something to Olivia, shaking her head emphatically, then headed for the door. Olivia tried to follow, but the scientist waved her off, practically running from the coffee shop. The man Jason had been watching immediately stood as well, abandoning his untouched coffee and following Dr. Winters outside. Jason was on his feet in an instant, moving to intercept Olivia. What happened? He asked under his breath as they moved toward the door. She panicked, Olivia replied, concern evident in her voice. Said she thought she recognized someone, that it wasn't safe anymore. She gave me the drive, but said it wasn't complete, that there were more files at her apartment she needed to get to me. They exited the coffee shop in time to see Dr. Winters hurrying toward the parking lot, the suspicious man following at a distance. Jason made a split-second decision. Follow her, he instructed Olivia. I'll handle our friend. Without waiting for a response, Jason veered off, circling around to approach the man from behind. Years of training made his movements fluid, unobtrusive. Just another morning commuter going about his business until the moment he wasn't. He closed the distance quickly, timing his approach to coincide with the man reaching the edge of the parking lot. In one smooth motion, Jason had the man's arm twisted behind his back, forcing him against the wall of a neighboring building. Who are you working for? Jason demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The man struggled, but Jason increased the pressure on his arm, eliciting a gasp of pain. Grant Defense, the man admitted through gritted teeth. Security Division. We're just watching her. Why? Jason pressed, knowing there was more. She took files when she left. Proprietary information. We're recovering company property, that's all. Jason didn't believe him for a second. And the men at the restaurant last night? Were they just recovering company property too? The man's slight hesitation was all the confirmation Jason needed. Tell Grant that if anything happens to Dr. Winters or Olivia Barnes, the files go public immediately. All of them, understand? The man nodded, and Jason released him with a warning shove. Now walk away. Don't look back. As the man hurried off, Jason jogged toward the parking lot, searching for Olivia. He found her standing beside their car, her face pale. She's gone, Olivia said, pointing to an empty parking space. Drove off before I could catch up, but she left this on my windshield. She held up a slip of paper with an address scrawled on it. Her apartment. She wants me to meet her there in an hour. Jason took the paper, studying the address. It could be a trap. Or she could have evidence that breaks this case wide open, Olivia countered. We have to go. Jason hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. We'll approach carefully. If anything seems off, we abort immediately. Clear? Clear, Olivia agreed, her determination matched by a newfound caution. The drive to Dr. Winters' apartment complex took 20 minutes. It was a modest building in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people lived unremarkable lives. Jason parked a block away, assessing the situation before approaching. No unusual vehicles, no obvious surveillance, he noted, but that doesn't mean they're not here. They walked to the building casually, just a couple visiting a friend on a weekday morning. Dr. Winters lived on the third floor, apartment 3C. As they climbed the stairs, Jason's sense of unease grew stronger. The hallway was too quiet, the air too still. Outside apartment 3C, he held up a hand, signaling Olivia to stop. Listening intently, he could hear no movement inside. No television, no radio, no sounds of life. Something's wrong, he whispered. Stay behind me. He tried the door handle, unlocked. Another bad sign. Pushing the door open slowly, Jason entered the apartment in a low crouch, scanning for threats. The living room appeared normal at first glance. Modest furniture, bookshelves lined with technical volumes, a laptop on the coffee table. But as Jason moved further in, the signs of struggle became apparent. A toppled lamp, a cushion out of place, scuff marks on the hardwood floor. Dr. Winters? Olivia called softly, following Jason into the apartment. No response. They moved through the small apartment methodically, checking each room. The kitchen was untouched. The home office had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered, and then they reached the bedroom. Dr. Rachel Winters lay on the bed, a pill bottle on the nightstand beside her, an open bottle of vodka on the floor. Her eyes were closed, her body still. Too still. No, Olivia whispered, rushing forward. She checked for a pulse, finding none. She's dead. God, she's dead. Jason surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. Made to look like suicide, pill bottle, alcohol. The classic narrative. Scientist cracks under pressure, takes her own life. But she wouldn't, Olivia insisted, looking around the room. She was scared, yes, but she was determined. She wanted justice. Jason nodded, already searching the room for evidence that might contradict the suicide narrative. They were here, probably waiting when she arrived home from the coffee shop. He pointed to subtle signs, the slightly ajar closet door, the too neat arrangement of items on the dresser. They staged this after killing her. Olivia sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the reality of the situation crashing down on her. This is my fault. If I hadn't contacted her... Stop, Jason cut her off firmly. This is Grant's doing, not yours. Dr. Winters made her choice to stand up for what's right, just like your father did, just like you're doing. He continued his methodical search of the room, looking for anything the killers might have missed. Under the edge of the bed, a small scrap of paper caught his eye. He retrieved it carefully, reading the hastily scrawled message. Truth doesn't die with the messenger. Find Project Ares. Olivia, he said quietly, handing her the note. She left us a message. Olivia read the note, her grief transforming into renewed determination. We need to find whatever she was trying to tell us about Project Ares. A sudden noise from the living room had both of them freezing in place. Footsteps. Someone else was in the apartment. Jason moved instantly, positioning himself between Olivia and the bedroom door, his hand going to the weapon concealed under his jacket. Stay behind me, he whispered. If I say run, you run. No arguments. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate and unhurried. Jason tensed, ready to confront whoever had returned to the scene of their crime. But the voice that called it out was hauntingly familiar. "Jason, you in here, brother?" Tom Davis, the last person Jason expected, or wanted, to see in that moment. "How did you find us?" Jason demanded as his former teammate appeared in the doorway, his muscular frame filling the space. Tom's eyes took in the scene quickly. The dead woman, Olivia's presence, Jason's defensive stance. "Same way they did," he replied grimly. "And they are coming back with reinforcements. We need to move. Now." "Tom Davis," Jason said, his voice a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "Been a long time." "Not long enough if we're meeting like this," Tom replied, his eyes darting to the body of Dr. Winters before returning to Jason. "We've got about 3 minutes before Grant's cleanup crew returns. Questions later. Movement now." Jason hesitated only a moment before making his decision. "Olivia, grab anything that looks important. Tom, what's our exit?" "Service stairs at the end of the hall. I've got a vehicle waiting 2 blocks east." Jason nodded, years of shared missions creating an instant operational rhythm despite the years of separation. He quickly searched the nightstand while Olivia gathered papers from the ransacked office. Tom positioned himself at the apartment door, watching the hallway with the practiced vigilance of someone who'd never truly left the battlefield. "Got it," Olivia called, holding up an external hard drive she'd found taped beneath the desk drawer. "And her laptop." "Time's up," Tom urged, as the sound of a car door slamming echoed from the street below. They moved swiftly through the hallway, Tom leading, Jason covering their rear. The service stairs were narrow and dimly lit, smelling of cleaning chemicals and old cigarette smoke. They descended in silence, footsteps muffled, minds racing. At the bottom, Tom paused, checking through a small window before pushing the door open to an alley behind the building. "My car's at the end of this alley. Move quickly, but don't run. Drawing attention is worse than taking an extra 10 seconds." They walked briskly to a nondescript black SUV with tinted windows. Tom slid into the driver's seat while Jason helped Olivia into the back before taking the passenger side. As they pulled away, 2 men in suits entered the alley from the street, heading toward the apartment building's rear entrance. "That was close," Olivia breathed, clutching Dr. Winters' laptop to her chest like a shield. "Too close," Jason agreed, turning to Tom with hard eyes. "Start talking. How did you know where we were? How are you involved in this?" Tom navigated through side streets, taking a deliberately confusing route away from the apartment complex. His face, once boyishly handsome despite the rigors of Special Forces training, had hardened over the years. A new scar traced a line from his right temple to his jawline, and the crinkles around his eyes spoke of years squinting against desert sun, or perhaps just worry. "I've been tracking Grant's security team for 6 months, Tom finally said. "They've been following Dr. Winters since she left the company. When she made contact with Olivia, they escalated surveillance. I picked up their chatter this morning about movement at her apartment." "That doesn't explain how you knew we'd be there," Jason pressed, not ready to trust his former teammate. Tom sighed, checking the rearview mirror before continuing. "I've been keeping tabs on you too, brother. Ever since you got involved with Barnes here." He glanced at Olivia in the mirror. "No offense, counselor." "Keeping tabs?" Jason's voice took on a dangerous edge. "Well, because I knew this day would come," Tom replied cryptically. "When Barnes started digging into Grant Defense, it was only a matter of time before you got pulled in. Captain Barnes saved your life. You were always going to repay that debt." "And your interest in this?" Olivia asked from the back seat, her lawyer's instinct for interrogation kicking in. Tom was quiet for a long moment, navigating a complex intersection before answering. "Let's just say Grant and I have unfinished business. I can explain more, but not here, not now. We need to get somewhere secure first." "The farmhouse is compromised," Jason said. "If you found us, so can they." "I've got a place," Tom offered. "Off the grid, stocked for emergencies." Jason and Olivia exchanged a glance through the rearview mirror. Neither fully trusted Tom, but their options were limited. "Emma," Jason said suddenly, "if they're tracking us, she could be in danger." "Already handled," Tom replied. "Called in a favor with Martinez. He's got a team watching the farmhouse. Your daughter is safe." "Martinez is involved too?" Jason's surprise was evident. Miguel Martinez had been another member of their SEAL team, one who'd taken a bullet through defective body armor, but survived, unlike some of their other teammates. More than you know, Tom said grimly. This goes deeper than faulty body armor, Jason, much deeper. They drove in tense silence for the next 20 minutes, heading into increasingly rural areas until Tom turned onto a gravel road that wound through dense woods. Eventually, they reached a small cabin nestled among the trees, nearly invisible from the road. Home sweet home, Tom announced, pulling up to the rustic structure, at least for the next few hours. Inside, the cabin was Spartan, but functional. A main room with basic furniture, a small kitchen area, and two doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The walls were bare except for a map of the region pinned above a desk covered in papers and equipment. Sit, Tom instructed, gesturing to the worn couch while he checked the perimeter. Jason remained standing, positioning himself between Tom and Olivia, still not ready to lower his guard completely. When Tom returned, he went directly to a cabinet, pulling out 3 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. "You're going to want this for what comes next," he said, pouring generous measures and handing them around. "I don't want a drink, Tom. I want answers," Jason said flatly, "and you'll get them." Tom downed his whiskey in one swallow. "But first, let's see what the good doctor left behind." Olivia placed the laptop and external drive on the coffee table. The laptop's password protected. "Try Aries 0723, Tom suggested, refilling his glass. Olivia gave him a suspicious look but typed in the password. The screen unlocked immediately. "How did you know that?" "Because July 23rd was the date of the first major armor failure in Afghanistan," Tom explained. "And Aries is what this is all really about." Boss Jason watched as Olivia navigated through the laptop's files, eventually connecting the external drive. "There's a lot here," she murmured. "Test results, internal memos, video files." "Look for anything related to Project Aries," Jason suggested, recalling Dr. Winter's final message. Olivia nodded, searching through the folders until she found one labeled simply A. Inside were dozens of files with cryptic names, strings of numbers and letters that revealed nothing about their contents. "This could take hours to sort through," she said with frustration. "Start with the most recent," Tom suggested, looking over her shoulder. Dr. Winters was gathering this information for a reason. The smoking gun is likely what she collected last. Olivia opened the most recently modified file, a video dated just 3 days earlier. The screen showed a laboratory setting with Dr. Winters speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead," her recorded voice began. "My name is Dr. Rachel Winters, former lead materials scientist at Grant Defense Technologies. What I'm about to share will put target on my back, but the truth needs to come out." The three watched in silence as Dr. Winters methodically outlined how Grant Defense had knowingly supplied defective body armor to American troops. She presented test results showing catastrophic failures under specific conditions that soldiers routinely encountered in combat zones. But the armor defects were just the beginning, Dr. Winters continued, her voice growing more strained. Project Aries was never really about protection. It was about the opposite. She explained how the revolutionary material in the armor contained compounds that, when subjected to certain environmental factors, broke down into chemicals that could be absorbed through the skin. In small doses, these compounds enhance physical performance temporarily, increase strength, reduce pain sensitivity, heightened alertness. Soldiers reported feeling invincible during intense combat situations. Grant marketed this as a feature, not a bug, claiming their armor somehow activated under stress to improve soldier performance. Dr. Winter's expression grew grim, but the long-term effects are devastating. Organ failure, neurological damage, increased cancer rates. Grant knew this from the beginning. It wasn't an accident. It was a weapons development program disguised as protective equipment. Olivia gasped, her hand covering her mouth. They were experimenting on soldiers. Project Aries, Tom said quietly, named after the god of war. They were creating chemical weapons and using our own troops as test subjects. Jason's face had gone hard as stone. "How many?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. Winters answered as if she'd anticipated the question. Based on deployment records, approximately 3,200 service members received the contaminated armor. Of those, 47 have died from direct armor failure in combat. Another 189 have died from unexplained medical complications within 2 years of exposure. Hundreds more are suffering from symptoms that military doctors can't explain. She leaned closer to the camera. This isn't just corporate negligence. This is a crime against humanity, committed against the very people sworn to protect our country. Grant needs to be stopped. The evidence is all here. She gestured to the files around her. Everything you need to bring him down. The video ended abruptly, leaving the room in heavy silence. Jesus Christ, Jason finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Now you understand why Grant is willing to kill to keep this quiet, Tom said, draining his second whiskey. It's not just about lawsuits or criminal charges. If this gets out, it's treason. Olivia was already digging through the other files, opening documents that corroborated Dr. Winter's claims. Internal emails discussing acceptable casualty rates, research papers documenting the chemical compounds, financial records showing payments to military officials who helped fast-track approval. This is monstrous, she said, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. My father must have discovered this. That's why they killed him. Jason turned to Tom, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. You knew about this. That's why you've been tracking Grant. How long have you known, Tom? Tom met his gaze unflinchingly. I started putting the pieces together after Martinez got sick. Remember how he recovered from that shot to the chest faster than the doctors thought possible? 6 months later, he's having seizures, blackouts, liver failure. No explanation until I started connecting the dots. Why didn't you come forward? Jason demanded. With what proof? Against a man who has half of Washington in his pocket? Tom shook his head. I needed evidence. Concrete, irrefutable evidence. That's why I've been watching Dr. Winters, hoping she'd lead me to it. He gestured to the laptop. And now she has. Olivia looked up from the screen. There's more. Grant is preparing to ship the next generation of this armor to units deploying next month. They've refined the formula, whatever that means. It means more soldiers are going to bomb, Jason said grimly. We need to stop this shipment. It's not that simple, Tom warned. Grant's facility is practically a fortress. Private security, former military, state-of-the-art surveillance. You can't just walk in and shut it down. No, Jason agreed, a plan already forming in his mind. But we can expose him. Get this evidence to people who can't be bought or threatened. Olivia nodded. I have contacts at the Justice Department who would take this seriously. And a journalist friend who would run with the story even if it cost him his career. It'll cost him more than his career if Grant finds out, Tom cautioned. Anyone we bring into this becomes a target. A sudden noise outside had all three freezing in place. Jason moved swiftly to the window, peering carefully through the blinds. Vehicle approaching, he reported, his voice dropping to a whisper. Black SUV, tinted windows. Expecting company? Olivia asked Tom, her voice tense. Tom shook his head, already moving to a cabinet where he retrieved 2 handguns, tossing one to Jason. Back door, now. They moved quickly, gathering the laptop and hard drive before slipping out the rear of the cabin. The woods behind the structure were dense, providing cover as they made their way to what appeared to be a small shed about 50 yards back. Inside, the shed's floor opened to reveal a hidden compartment containing emergency supplies and another set of car keys. Fallback vehicle is through those trees, Tom explained, pointing north. Old Jeep, not pretty but reliable. Take it and head west. There's a motel called the Oakwood Inn about 30 miles from here. Pay cash, use the name Stevens. I'll meet you there when I can. You're not coming with us? Jason asked, suspicious again. I'm going to lead them away, Tom replied. Give you time to get clear. They're after the evidence, not me specifically. I can buy you a few hours. Jason hesitated, years of ingrained caution warring with the memory of a man who'd once had his back in the world's most dangerous places. How do I know I can trust you, Tom? Tom's expression softened slightly. You don't. But Emma needs her dad to come home, and that's more likely to happen if I draw their attention away from you. He checked his weapon, his movements automatic from years of practice. Besides, Martinez would kill me if I let anything happen to you. A moment of understanding passed between the former teammates. Not quite trust, but a recognition of shared purpose. Go, Tom urged as the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the cabin. Stay alive. Finish this. Jason nodded once, then guided Olivia deeper into the woods toward the promised escape vehicle. Behind them, they heard Tom moving in the opposite direction, deliberately making noise to draw attention away from their escape route. The Jeep was exactly where Tom had said it would be, an older model covered with a camouflage tarp, keys hidden in the wheel well. Within minutes, they were bouncing down a narrow logging road, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. Do you think he'll be okay? Olivia asked, clutching the laptop bag containing their precious evidence. Tom can take care of himself, Jason replied, though uncertainty tinged his voice. Always could. They drove in tense silence for several miles, both processing the revelations from Dr. Winter's files. Finally, Olivia spoke, her voice quiet but determined. My father knew. That's why he pushed himself in front of that bullet for you. He knew the armor wouldn't stop it anyway, and he was already exposed to the chemicals. He was trying to save at least one person from this nightmare. Jason gripped the steering wheel tighter, memories of that day flooding back with painful clarity. Your father was the best man I ever served under. He deserved better than to die in the dust for a corrupt businessman's profits. Then let's make sure his sacrifice means something, Olivia said with renewed determination. Let's finish what he started. They reached the main highway without incident, blending into the light midday traffic. Jason drove exactly at the speed limit, careful not to draw attention as they made their way toward the Oakwood Inn. We need to check on Emma, he said as they drove. I don't care what Tom says about Martinez having people watching her. I need to know she's safe. Olivia nodded, understanding completely. We'll call from the motel, safer than using our cell phones on the road. The Oakwood Inn turned out to be a modest roadside motel, the kind that had seen better days but still maintained a certain charm. The kind of place that didn't ask too many questions when a couple paid cash for a room with no reservation. Once inside their room, Jason immediately went to the landline phone while Olivia set up the laptop on the small desk. Mary, it's Jason, he said when his call was answered. Mary Peterson was their elderly neighbor in Oak Ridge, a retired school teacher who often watched Emma when Jason had late plumbing jobs. Is everything okay there? Yes, I know some men stop by. No, they're colleagues from my Navy days. Is Emma doing all right? Can I speak with her? Olivia watched as Jason's tense expression softened at the sound of his daughter's voice. Hey, Princess. Yes, I'm with Miss Olivia. We're helping some people who need our special help. I know, I miss you too. Be good for Mrs. Peterson, okay? I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I'll be home soon, I promise. As he hung up, Jason looked both relieved and troubled. She's safe for now, but Grant's men have already been to town asking questions. Mary said they were polite, claimed to be old Navy buddies looking to surprise me, but Emma didn't like them, said they felt wrong. She has good instincts, Olivia observed, like her father. We need to move quickly, Jason said, pacing the small room. The longer this drags on, the more danger she's in. Olivia nodded, turning back to the laptop. I've been going through more of Dr. Winter's files. She compiled dossiers on key people involved in Project Ares. She opened a folder containing personnel files. Most are Grant executives, but there are some military and political figures too. People who helped cover up the problems or fast-tracked approvals. Jason looked over her shoulder as she scrolled through the files. Suddenly, he reached out to stop her. Wait, go back. Olivia scrolled back to a file labeled Davis T. Tom, Jason breathed, opening the file. Inside was a comprehensive dossier on their former teammate, including financial records showing regular payments from a shell company linked to Grant Defense. He's been working for Grant all along, Jason said, disbelief and betrayal coloring his voice. Since before our last deployment, before the ambush. The implications hit him like a physical blow. He knew about the defective armor. He knew we were walking into that ambush with equipment that wouldn't protect us. Olivia placed a hand on his arm, steadying him as the pieces fell into place. The cabin. He led us there, then conveniently had to leave when company arrived. He wasn't drawing them away from us. He was leading them to us. Jason's expression hardened as he processed this betrayal. And now he knows exactly where we're headed. This motel was his suggestion. We need to leave. Now, Olivia said, already gathering their things. But before they could move toward the door, Jason's phone buzzed with a text message from Tom. They found Winter's backup files, all evidence pointing to military contact who has full documentation of Project Ares. Name Cameron Hayes. Last known location, Johnson County Memorial Park. Meet there at sunset if you want the complete file. Olivia read the message over Jason's shoulder. It's another trap. Probably, Jason agreed, but Cameron Hayes is real. He was part of our unit, left the service right after the Afghanistan incident. If he has evidence about Project Ares, it could be the final piece we need, Olivia finished his thought. But how can we trust this when we know Tom is working for Grant? Jason stared at the message, years of tactical training kicking in as he analyzed their options. We can't, but we also can't ignore it. Hayes might be in danger if he really does have evidence. So what do we do? Olivia asked. Before Jason could answer, a notification popped up on the laptop. An incoming email to Dr. Winter's account. Olivia clicked it open cautiously. It's from someone named Elena Winters, she said. Rachel's sister, asking if she's okay, saying she hasn't heard from her in days. Jason looked thoughtful. Reply. Tell her who we are and that her sister was helping us with an important case before she died. Ask if Rachel sent her anything for safekeeping recently. Olivia composed the message carefully, explaining enough to convey the seriousness of the situation without sharing details that might put Elena in danger. Within minutes, a reply came back. Rachel sent me a package last week with instructions to keep it sealed unless I didn't hear from her for 3 days. Inside was a letter explaining some of what she was involved in and a set of GPS coordinates with a note saying, "The real Ares files are here. I was going to call the police today." Attached to the email were the coordinates and a scan of Rachel's letter, which confirmed much of what they already knew, but added a crucial detail. The Hayes documentation is the key to everything. It proves Grant knew about the chemical effects from the beginning because they were the entire point of the project. Jason and Olivia exchanged a glance. The path forward suddenly clear. Tom wants us to meet this Hayes person at the Memorial Park, Jason said slowly. But the real evidence is at these coordinates. So we split up? Olivia suggested. Jason shook his head firmly. No, too dangerous. We make Tom think we're taking the bait, but we go for the real evidence instead. And Hayes, if he's real and really in danger? Jason's expression was grim. I'll contact Martinez directly. If he's really watching out for us and not involved with Tom's betrayal, he can check out the Memorial Park situation. As they prepared to leave, gathering the evidence and wiping down the room to remove traces of their presence, Jason paused by the window, checking for suspicious vehicles. I can't believe Tom would betray us like this, he said quietly. We were brothers. We bled together. Olivia approached, standing beside him. People change, Jason. Sometimes money corrupts. Sometimes pressure breaks even good men. Jason nodded, though the pain of betrayal still burned fresh. Let's go get the evidence. Then we end this. For your father, for Dr. Winters, and for every soldier who trusted their government to protect them instead of using them as lab rats. As they slipped out the back of the motel toward their hidden Jeep, neither noticed the small drone hovering high above the parking lot, its camera tracking their movements with mechanical precision. In a sleek office 40 miles away, Maxwell Grant watched the live feed, a satisfied smile spreading across his face as he lifted a phone to his ear. They took the bait, he said simply. Proceed as planned. The coordinates from Elena Winters led them to an abandoned grain silo 20 miles outside the city limits. As they approached in the borrowed Jeep, Jason scanned the surroundings with a practiced eye of someone who'd spent years identifying potential ambush points. The structure stood isolated in a field of tall grass, its metal skin rusted from decades of prairie winds and rain. Stay in the vehicle until I clear it, Jason instructed, checking his weapon before exiting. We're in this together, Olivia countered, her voice firm. I'm not sitting in the car while you take all the risks. Jason recognized the determined set of her jaw, the same expression her father had worn when his mind was made up. Fine, but stay behind me and move exactly as I tell you. They approached the silo cautiously, using the tall grass for cover as they worked their way toward the structure. No vehicles were visible nearby, no signs of recent activity around the perimeter. The padlock on the door had been cut, replaced with a newer one that glinted in the afternoon sun. "Someone's been here recently," Jason observed, examining the lock without touching it. "Could be Dr. Winters. Could be someone else." "The email said she hid something here," Olivia reminded him. "She must have had a key." Jason nodded, pulling a small case from his pocket that contained lock-picking tools, another remnant of his former life that had proven useful in civilian circumstances more often than he'd expected. "Where did a plumber learn to pick locks?" Olivia asked as he worked on the padlock. Jason gave her a small smile. "Sometimes people lock themselves out of their bathrooms, cheaper than breaking down the door." The lock yielded with a soft click, and Jason eased the door open slowly, weapon ready. The interior was dim, shafts of light penetrating through small gaps in the metal walls. Dust particles danced in the beams of sunlight, but nothing else moved inside the cavernous space. "Clear," Jason announced after a methodical sweep of the interior. "But stay alert." The silo's interior had been partially converted into a makeshift storage space. Metal shelving lined one wall, holding various containers and equipment. A small desk sat in the center, incongruous in the industrial setting. "Look for anything that might contain documents or digital storage," Jason instructed as they began searching the space. Olivia moved to the desk, examining its surface before checking the drawers. Nothing here except some old invoices for farm equipment, dated 6 years ago. Jason was inspecting the shelving units when he noticed something unusual about the concrete floor near the center of the silo. "Olivia, look at this." A section of the floor appeared slightly different, newer concrete that didn't quite match the surrounding area. Jason knelt, running his fingers along the seam where the sections met. "There's something under here." Using a crowbar he found among the shelves, Jason pried at the edge of the concrete section. It lifted surprisingly easily, revealing a metal box embedded in the floor. The box was secured with a combination lock. "Any ideas for the combination?" Jason asked, examining the lock. Olivia thought for a moment. "Try 0723, the same numbers from her password." Jason dialed the combination, but the lock remained secured. "No good." "What about—" Olivia's voice trailed off as she had another thought. Her sister's email mentioned Hayes. "Try 4293, that's Hayes on a phone keypad." Jason tried the new combination, and this time the lock opened with a satisfying click. Inside the box was a waterproof container holding a laptop, several flash drives, and a sealed envelope with "insurance" written across it in bold letters. "This is it," Olivia breathed, carefully lifting the items from their hiding place. Everything Dr. Winters wanted to protect. As they examined their find, a faint mechanical hum became audible from outside. Jason tensed, immediately recognizing the sound. "Drone," he said tersely. "We need to move. Now." They quickly repacked the evidence, securing it in Olivia's backpack as the humming grew louder. Jason peered through a crack in the silo wall, spotting the small aircraft hovering about 100 yards away, its camera clearly directed toward the silo. "They found us," he stated grimly, "which means ground forces won't be far behind." Olivia's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "What's our play?" "We can't take the jeep, too exposed. We'll have to move on foot through the fields until we can find another vehicle." Jason was already planning their escape route, calculating distances and cover options. "There's a farmhouse about 2 miles west. If we can reach it—" The sound of approaching vehicles cut him off. Through the gaps in the silo wall, they could see 3 black SUVs speeding toward them across the open field. "No time," Jason decided. "We make our stand here. This structure gives us cover and limited entry points. Better than being caught in the open." He quickly positioned Olivia behind the metal shelving units, providing her with both concealment and protection from incoming fire. "Stay down. If anything happens to me, there's a drainage pipe on the north side. It's your best escape route." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, checking the small pistol he'd given her earlier. "Your job is to get that evidence out," Jason reminded her firmly. "Nothing else matters. Not me, not you, just exposing the truth. That's what your father would want." The vehicles had reached the silo now, surrounding it as men in tactical gear deployed around the perimeter. Jason counted at least 8 hostiles through the various gaps in the walls. Professional operators based on their movement patterns, likely ex-military, possibly former special forces like himself. "Jason Reeves," a voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. This doesn't have to get messy. Just send out the woman and the evidence, and we can talk this through." Jason recognized the voice immediately. Tom Davis. "Seems like we're already talking, Tom," he called back, positioning himself where he could watch both the main entrance and a smaller access door on the opposite side. "Why don't you come in and we'll discuss it face to face?" "Always the hard way with you, isn't it?" Tom replied, a note of genuine regret in his voice. "You know I can't do that. Grant wants the evidence and the lawyer. Give them up and you can walk away. Go back to your daughter. Live your life." "We both know that's not true," Jason countered, watching as the tactical team began to maneuver into breach positions. "Grant can't afford to leave witnesses." "You're making a mistake, brother," Tom warned. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. This isn't Afghanistan. There's no extraction team coming for you." Jason caught Olivia's eye across the space, silently communicating his plan with hand signals they'd practiced during the drive. She nodded her understanding, clutching the backpack containing their evidence. "Maybe not," Jason called back. "But I'm not the same man you knew in Afghanistan either." "I've got nothing to lose now, Tom. That makes me dangerous." "You've got Emma," Tom reminded him. "She needs her father to come home." The mention of his daughter sent a chill through Jason. "Is that a threat, Tom?" "It's a reality check," Tom replied. "Last chance, Jason. Send out Barnes and the evidence." Jason didn't respond. Instead, he silently counted down from 3 on his fingers, where Olivia could see. As he reached 1, he fired 2 quick shots through the gap in the wall near where Tom's voice had been coming from, then immediately rolled to a different position. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets punching through the thin metal walls of the silo. Jason stayed low, moving from cover to cover as he returned fire strategically, not attempting to hit targets he couldn't see clearly, but keeping the attackers at bay and drawing their attention away from Olivia's position. In the chaos, Olivia moved as instructed, keeping to the shadows as she made her way toward the north side of the structure where the drainage pipe offered an escape route. The backpack with the evidence was clutched tightly to her chest, her expression set with determination, despite the fear evident in her eyes. Jason provided covering fire as she reached the access point, a rusted grate covering a wide drainage pipe that disappeared under the foundation. With a nod from Jason, Olivia removed the grate and prepared to enter the dark passage. "Get to the farmhouse," Jason instructed during a brief lull in the gunfire. "Find a vehicle, get back to Emma, and get that evidence to your Justice Department contact. Don't wait for me." "Jason," she began to protest. "Promise me," he cut her off, his eyes intense. "Emma needs someone to look after her if I don't make it out. Someone who understands what happened to her mother, to her father, someone who shares our values." Olivia held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "I promise. But you'd better do everything you can to come back to her." "Count on it," Jason replied with a grim smile. "Now go." As Olivia disappeared into the drainage pipe, Jason turned his full attention to the increasingly precarious tactical situation. The attackers were coordinating their approach, preparing for a breach from multiple entry points. He needed to buy Olivia as much time as possible to get clear before they realized she was gone. Moving to a position near the main entrance, Jason prepared for the coming assault. Years of training had taught him that sometimes the best defense was a good offense. Rather than waiting for them to come to him, he would bring the fight to them. Taking a deep breath, he burst through the door, firing with precision at the 2 nearest attackers while diving toward a stack of old equipment that provided cover. The sudden aggressive move caught them off guard, creating momentary confusion that Jason exploited to eliminate a third hostile. "He's out!" someone shouted. "East side!" Jason used the distraction to move again, circling behind a tractor to approach the SUVs from an unexpected angle. If he could reach one of the vehicles, he might be able to create an even bigger diversion, or potentially escape himself. As he maneuvered between positions, a familiar voice came from behind him. "Always we're better at offense than defense." Jason turned to find Tom standing 15 feet away, pistol trained on his chest. Unlike the tactical team members, Tom wore civilian clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt under a leather jacket. He looked remarkably calm, almost sad. "You betrayed us," Jason said flatly, his own weapon pointed at his former teammate. "You knew about the armor. You let our brothers die." Tom's expression remained impassive. "It's more complicated than that, Jason. 47 dead from direct armor failure, another 189 from complications. Seems pretty simple to me." Jason's finger rested lightly on the trigger, years of friendship warring with the evidence of betrayal. "Where's Barnes?" Tom asked, glancing around. "And the evidence?" "Gone," Jason replied with grim satisfaction. "You'll never find them in time." Tom sighed, seeming genuinely disappointed. "You know I can't let you leave, right? Grant wants this contained." "And what do you want, Tom?" Jason challenged. "Money? Power? Was that worth the lives of our teammates? Worth Captain Barnes?" For the first time, something like doubt flickered across Tom's face. No one was supposed to die that day. The armor was just supposed to collect data. The ambush wasn't part of the plan. "But you knew the armor was defective," Jason pressed. "You knew and you said nothing." Tom's gun hand wavered slightly. "I had orders, Jason, same as you always had, just from different people." "I never took orders to experiment on my own men," Jason countered, his voice hard with controlled rage. The standoff stretched between them, neither man willing to pull the trigger despite the clear tactical necessity. Years of shared combat, of saving each other's lives, created a bond that even betrayal couldn't completely sever. The moment was shattered by the arrival of another vehicle, a sleek black sedan that pulled up behind the SUVs. The rear door opened and Maxwell Grant himself stepped out, immaculately dressed in an expensive suit that seemed absurdly out of place in the dusty field. "Mr. Davis," Grant called, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Status report." Tom didn't take his eyes off Jason. "Target acquired. Barnes and the evidence are unaccounted for." Grant approached, flanked by two security men, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than alarm. "Mr. Reeves," he acknowledged with a slight nod, "this is all very dramatic and unnecessary. Where is Ms. Barnes?" "Safe from you," Jason replied coldly, along with everything Dr. Winters collected about Project Ares. If Grant was concerned, he didn't show it. Instead, he straightened his cuffs in a casual gesture that seemed incongruously civilized amid the violence. "You misunderstand the situation. Project Ares is a classified military initiative with national security implications. The materials you've stolen are government property. The materials we've stolen document crimes against American soldiers," Jason corrected him. "Soldiers who trusted their government and the contractors who supplied their equipment." Grant smiled thinly. "Progress requires sacrifice, Mr. Reeves. Always has. The data collected from Project Ares has advanced our understanding of human performance enhancement by decades. The military applications alone justify the cost." "Tell that to the families of the dead," Jason spat. "Tell that to Captain Barnes." At the mention of Barnes, something cold and dangerous flickered in Grant's eyes. Captain Barnes was a self-righteous obstacle to progress, much like his daughter. "And now, it seems, you." He turned to Tom. "Finish this, Mr. Davis. We have a leak to contain." Tom's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but he gave a short nod. "Yes, sir." Grant returned to his vehicle, clearly considering the matter settled. As the sedan pulled away, Tom and Jason remained locked in their standoff. "He killed Captain Barnes," Jason said quietly. "He killed my commanding officer, my friend, your friend. And now you're working for him." "It's not that simple," Tom repeated, though with less conviction. "It is that simple," Jason insisted. "You make a choice, Tom. Right here, right now, what side of this are you really on?" For a long moment, Tom seemed genuinely torn, the weight of years of deception visibly pressing down on him. Then almost imperceptibly, something shifted in his stance. "Duck," he said suddenly. Jason dropped instantly as Tom pivoted and fired, taking down one of Grant's security men who had circled behind Jason, weapon raised. Chaos erupted once more as the remaining tactical team realized what had happened. Tom grabbed Jason's arm, pulling him toward cover behind one of the SUVs. "We've got about 30 seconds before they regroup," Tom said urgently. "I can explain everything later, but right now we need to move." "Why should I trust you?" Jason demanded, though he was already scanning for an escape route. Because I just shot one of Grant's men to save your life, Tom replied impatiently. And because I've been working undercover for the past 3 years, gathering evidence against Grant for the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. Jason stared at him in disbelief. You're a federal agent? Something like that, Tom confirmed. Now, where's Barnes? Heading for the farmhouse to the west, Jason replied, making a split-second decision to trust his former teammate. If she made it out of the drainage pipe. Tom nodded, pulling keys from his pocket. I'll create a diversion. You get to the farmhouse. Take my truck. It's the black Ford at the end. Grant doesn't know I'm with the DCIS. If I leave with you now, my cover's blown completely. You're staying? Jason asked, surprised. I need to contain this situation and maintain my position a little longer, Tom explained. There are bigger players involved than just Grant. We need them all. Gunfire erupted again as the tactical team began to converge on their position. Tom handed Jason the keys. Questions later, he said firmly. Now go find Barnes and that evidence. And Jason, watch out for the ghost. The ghost? Jason repeated. Grant's top enforcer. If the tactical team fails, he'll send the ghost after you and Barnes. He never fails. Tom checked his weapon. Now move. I've got this. As Tom laid down covering fire, Jason sprinted for the truck, keeping low and using the vehicles for cover. He reached the Ford just as an explosion rocked one of the other SUVs. Tom's diversion, and the effective one. In the chaos, Jason slipped behind the wheel and sped away toward the farmhouse, his mind racing to process the revelation that Tom might have been on the right side all along. The farmhouse came into view after a few minutes of driving across the rough field. It was a weathered two-story structure with a large barn nearby, apparently abandoned based on the overgrown yard and boarded-up windows. Jason approached cautiously, parking the truck behind the barn to conceal it from the road. Olivia, he called softly as he entered the barn, weapon ready. No response. The barn was empty except for old farm equipment and several decades' worth of accumulated junk. Jason moved quickly to the house, checking each room methodically. No sign of Olivia. Had she made it out of the drainage pipe? Had she found transportation as they'd planned? Or had someone else found her first? A faint tire track in the dirt near the back of the property caught his attention. Fresh, leading away toward a county road visible in the distance. If Olivia had found a vehicle, she would have headed that way to reach the main highway. Jason returned to the truck, following the tire tracks until they merged with the gravel county road. There he faced a choice. Left would lead back toward the city, right would lead deeper into rural areas where they'd be harder to track but also farther from help. Knowing Olivia, she would head for Emma first, fulfilling her promise to protect his daughter if anything happened to him. That meant going left, back toward Oak Ridge. As he drove, Jason tried Tom's phone but got no answer. Whatever was happening back at the silo, Tom was either unable or unwilling to communicate. The revelation that Tom might have been working undercover all along complicated an already complex situation. If true, it meant they had an ally close to Grant, but it also meant that everything Tom had told them needed to be reevaluated. 20 minutes of driving brought Jason to a small roadside diner, the kind of place travelers stopped for coffee and local farmers gathered for breakfast. His tactical instincts made him slow down, scanning the parking lot. There, parked at the far end, an old blue pickup truck that hadn't been there when they'd driven past earlier that day. It could be coincidence, but Jason had long ago stopped believing in coincidences. He pulled in, parking some distance from the blue truck, and entered the diner casually. The lunch crowd had thinned, with only a few patrons scattered among the booths. No sign of Olivia at first glance. Jason took a seat at the counter, positioning himself to watch both the entrance and the restrooms. The waitress approached with a coffee pot. "Just passing through?" she asked as she filled his cup. "Looking for a friend," Jason replied with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. She might have stopped in. Dark hair, professional-looking woman, probably in a hurry. The waitress nodded. "Bathroom," she said simply, tilting her head toward the back. Jason thanked her, taking a sip of coffee while keeping his gaze fixed on the restroom door. When it opened a minute later and Olivia emerged, the relief on her face at seeing him was palpable. She slid onto the stool beside him, her voice low and urgent. "You made it. I was getting worried." "Had some unexpected help," Jason replied, equally quiet. "Tom may not be who we thought." Olivia's eyebrows rose in surprise, but before she could respond, her expression suddenly froze, her eyes fixed on something over Jason's shoulder. "Don't react," she whispered. "The man who just walked in. I recognize him from Dr. Winter's files. He works for Grant." Jason resisted the urge to turn, instead using the reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser to glimpse the newcomer, tall, lean, with the bland, forgettable features of someone professionally trained to blend in. His clothes were expensive, but understated, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator. "The ghost," Jason murmured, remembering Tom's warning. "We need to leave. Now." They paid quickly and walked out, moving casually but purposefully toward Olivia's borrowed truck. The ghost followed at a distance, not bothering to hide his pursuit. "The evidence?" Jason asked as they reached the vehicle. "Secure," Olivia confirmed, patting the backpack still slung over her shoulder. "I checked the files while waiting for you. It's worse than we thought, Jason. Hayes documented everything. Grant wasn't just testing chemical compounds on soldiers. He was developing a new type of warfare, something that could turn our own troops into weapons. And he had help from inside the Pentagon." Jason processed this as he scanned for immediate threats. The ghost had emerged from the diner and was walking unhurriedly toward them, his posture relaxed but purpose evident in every step. "Get in," Jason instructed, taking the driver's seat while Olivia hurried around to the passenger side. "We need to reach Emma before he can call in our location." As they pulled out of the parking lot, the ghost made no move to pursue them directly. Instead, he simply watched them leave, then pulled out a phone. "That's not good," Jason muttered, accelerating onto the highway. "He's not chasing us because he doesn't need to. He knows where we're going." "Emma?" Olivia realized, her face paling. Jason pushed the truck faster, weaving through traffic with the skill of someone trained in evasive driving. "Call Mrs. Peterson. Tell her to take Emma somewhere public. The library, the mall, anywhere with witnesses. Then call your Justice Department contact. We need to get this evidence into official hands now." As Olivia made the calls, Jason's mind raced through contingencies. The ghost would be heading for Emma too, probably with reinforcements. Grant would throw everything he had at stopping them, now that exposure was imminent. "Mrs. Peterson isn't answering," Olivia reported anxiously, "and my Justice Department contact says he needs at least 2 hours to arrange a secure meeting." "We don't have 2 hours," Jason replied grimly. "We need to get to Emma now." They were still 30 minutes from Oak Ridge when Jason's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. "Mr. Reeves," Maxwell Grant's smooth voice filled the cab of the truck. "I believe we have a mutual interest to discuss." "I have nothing to say to you," Jason replied coldly. "Perhaps not to me," Grant acknowledged, "but I think you'll want to speak with someone else." There was a pause, then a small, frightened voice came on the line. "Daddy?" Jason's blood turned to ice. "Emma? Baby, are you okay?" "I'm scared, Daddy," Emma whimpered. "The men said I have to go with them, but Mrs. Peterson is sleeping and won't wake up." "Did they hurt you?" Jason demanded, his voice tight with controlled panic. "No, but—" Emma's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by Grant's again. "She's unharmed, Mr. Reeves, for now. Whether she remains that way depends entirely on you and Ms. Barnes." "If you touch her," Jason began, but Grant cut him off. "Threats are unnecessary and unproductive," he said dismissively. "Here's what's going to happen. You will bring Miss Barnes and all evidence related to Project Ares to the address that will be texted to you. You will come alone, unarmed. Do this, and your daughter goes home safely. Fail to comply, and well, I'm sure a man of your background can imagine the alternatives." The line went dead, followed immediately by a text with an address. A warehouse on the outskirts of the city, isolated and perfect for Grant's purposes. "It's a trap," Olivia said unnecessarily, her face ashen. "Of course it is," Jason agreed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "But they have my daughter." Olivia placed a hand on his arm. "We'll get her back, Jason, but we need a plan that doesn't involve handing over the only evidence that can bring Grant down." Jason nodded, his tactical mind already working through scenarios despite the fear gripping his heart. "First, we need backup. Someone Grant doesn't know about or control." "Who do we have left to trust?" Olivia asked. Jason thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Martinez. If Tom was telling the truth about working undercover, Then Martinez might be too. It's a risk, but we're out of options. As they raced toward the city, Jason made the call that would either save them all or deliver them directly into Grant's hands. Everything now depended on whether the bonds forged in combat could withstand years of deception and betrayal. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the darkening sky. Jason parked the truck half a mile away, using the cover of an abandoned gas station to conceal their approach. The sun was setting, painting the industrial landscape in hues of orange and purple as shadows lengthened across the cracked concrete. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked, her voice tight with tension as she checked the backpack containing their evidence one last time. "No," Jason admitted, "but it's the only play we've got." He adjusted the earpiece Martinez had provided, a small flesh-colored device nearly invisible once in place. "Martinez, comm check," he murmured. "Reading you 5 by 5, came the response in his ear. Miguel Martinez, once a fellow SEAL and now their only hope for backup, had responded to Jason's call without hesitation. Whether that was loyalty or another layer of deception remained to be seen. "Remember," Jason told Olivia as they prepared to move, "stay close to me. No matter what happens, no matter what Grant says or does, don't let them separate us." Olivia nodded, her face pale but determined. In the few days they'd known each other, she'd demonstrated a resilience that reminded Jason powerfully of her father. Captain Barnes would have been proud of the woman his daughter had become. "We're going to get Emma back," she said with quiet conviction. "And we're going to make Grant pay for everything he's done." Jason checked his watch, 7:28 p.m. Grant had given them until 8 p.m. to surrender themselves and the evidence. They were early, which was intentional. The more time they had to assess the situation before making contact, the better their chances. "Martinez, we're moving to the warehouse now," Jason whispered. "Any sign of Tom?" "Negative," Martinez replied. "No contact since you left the silo. But I've got eyes on the warehouse. 4 vehicles, minimum 8 hostiles plus Grant himself. No visual on your daughter yet." Jason absorbed this information, his tactical mind evaluating angles of approach and potential extraction points. "Acknowledged. Stay dark until my signal." They moved through the growing darkness with practiced stealth, Jason leading the way through overgrown loading areas and around rusting equipment. As they neared the warehouse, he could make out the vehicles Martinez had reported. 2 black SUVs, a silver sedan that likely belonged to Grant, and a nondescript van parked near the main entrance. "There," Olivia whispered, pointing to a small window on the warehouse's second level where a light was visible. "Could be where they're holding Emma." Jason nodded, adjusting their approach to circle around to that side of the building. Years of special operations had taught him to gather as much intelligence as possible before committing to action. Right now, Emma's location was the critical unknown. They reached a side entrance, finding it guarded by a single man in tactical gear who looked bored as he smoked a cigarette. Jason signaled for Olivia to stay hidden, then moved silently through the shadows. The guard never saw him coming. A quick chokehold, and the man was unconscious, his radio and weapon now in Jason's possession. "One down," Jason reported quietly into his comm. "We're entering the east side." The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, with most of the illumination coming from the second floor. The ground level was a maze of abandoned machinery and shipping containers, providing ample cover for their approach. Jason led the way, moving from shadow to shadow with Olivia following closely. Voices echoed from above, men talking, occasional laughter, the casual sounds of professionals waiting for their mission to begin. And then, cutting through it all, a child's voice. "I want my daddy." "Emma." Jason froze, every muscle tensing at the sound of his daughter's fear. Olivia placed a steadying hand on his arm, a silent reminder to keep his emotions in check. They couldn't help Emma if they rushed in blindly. "Your daddy will be here soon," came a smooth, cultured voice. "Maxwell Grant himself. And then everyone can go home." Jason checked his watch again, 7:42 p.m. They still had time to position themselves advantageously before the deadline. "I count 4 men on the main floor, at least 3 more upstairs with Grant and Emma," he whispered to Olivia, and through the comm to Martinez. "We need to create a diversion to thin them out." "Working on it," Martinez replied. 2 minutes. They waited in tense silence, the seconds ticking by with excruciating slowness. Then, from the far side of the warehouse, A series of small explosions erupted, followed by the wail of car alarms from the parking area. The reaction was immediate. Shouts of alarm, the pounding of boots as men ran to investigate, orders being barked over radios. The guard count on the main floor dropped from 4 to 1 as the others rushed to respond to the perceived threat. Now, Jason whispered, moving quickly toward the stairs, with Olivia right behind him. They encountered the remaining guard at the base of the metal staircase. Before he could raise his weapon, Jason was on him. A quick strike to the throat, silencing any alarm he might have raised. The man crumpled, and they continued upward, the sounds of confusion from outside masking their approach. At the top of the stairs, Jason paused, listening. The voices were clearer now. Grant speaking on a phone, sounding irritated at the disruption. Emma's soft crying. Another voice, low and professional, that Jason recognized as belonging to the ghost. "She's in there," Jason whispered, indicating a door at the end of the corridor. "Grant and his enforcer are with her." "What's the play?" Olivia asked, her lawyer's mind seeking the angles, the leverage they might use. Jason considered their options. Direct confrontation was risky with Emma in the room. The ghost was a professional killer, and Grant had already demonstrated his willingness to sacrifice innocent lives. They needed an edge. "We use their own plan against them," he decided. "They're expecting us to surrender. Let's give them what they're expecting, but on our terms." He quickly outlined his approach. It was dangerous, with too many variables, but it was the best chance they had to get Emma out safely while preserving the evidence against Grant. "Martinez," Jason whispered into his comm, "stand by for extraction. Southside loading doors, 2 minutes." "Copy that," came the response. "Be advised, new players on the field. Armed response team approaching from the west. Cannot identify." Jason processed this new complication. Another team entering the mix could either work in their favor by dividing Grant's attention or add another deadly variable to an already volatile situation. "Understood. Proceeding with the plan. Be ready for anything." With a final nod to Olivia, Jason stood and walked openly down the corridor, weapon holstered and hands visible. Olivia followed a few steps behind, carrying the backpack with their evidence. "Grant," Jason called out as he approached the door. "I'm here as agreed. Let my daughter go." The door swung open, revealing Maxwell Grant standing behind a desk, looking every inch the corporate executive despite the unusual setting. Emma sat in a chair to his right, her small face tear-streaked but lighting up at the sight of her father. The ghost stood beside her, his hand resting casually on her shoulder. A clear threat. "Mr. Reeves," Grant acknowledged with a thin smile. "Precisely on time. Military punctuality, I presume." "Let her go," Jason repeated, his voice level despite the rage boiling inside him at the sight of his daughter in the hands of these men. "You have me. You have the evidence. Emma's not part of this." Grant studied him for a moment, then nodded to the ghost, who removed his hand from Emma's shoulder but remained standing beside her. "The evidence first," Grant instructed, gesturing to the backpack Olivia carried. Olivia stepped forward, placing the backpack on the desk. Grant opened it, examining the laptop and flash drives with evident satisfaction. "Very good," he said. "Now, Ms. Barnes, your phone as well. I know you've made copies." Olivia hesitated, then placed her phone on the desk beside the backpack. Grant smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. "You see, civilized people can resolve their differences without unpleasantness." He turned to the ghost. "Verify the materials are complete." As the ghost moved to examine the evidence, Jason took a half step closer to Emma. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "Everything's going to be fine now." Emma looked up at him with complete trust, the same trust she'd shown when he promised her a normal life in Oak Ridge, the same trust she'd shown every time he told her the monsters weren't real. Only this time, the monsters were very real, and they were standing in this room. The ghost finished his inspection, giving Grant a short nod. "It appears to be all here, sir." "Excellent," Grant replied, his demeanor relaxing slightly. "Now, I believe we had an agreement. The child can go." He gestured to Emma, who immediately ran to her father. Jason knelt, wrapping his arms around her tightly, feeling her small body tremble against his. "You came," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Always," Jason promised. "I will always come for you." Over Emma's head, he met Olivia's gaze, a silent message passing between them. The next part of their plan was the most dangerous, but it was their only chance to salvage both Emma's safety and the evidence against Grant. "Mr. Reeves," Grant said, interrupting the reunion, "while this is touching, we have unfinished business. Your daughter is free to go, but you and Ms. Barnes will be staying with us for a while longer." "That wasn't our agreement," Jason objected, still holding Emma protectively. Grant's smile turned cold. "The agreement was that your daughter would go home safely, and she will, just not with you." At a signal from Grant, the door opened again, and another of his security men entered. "This man will escort young Emma back to Mrs. Peterson. You and I have matters to discuss regarding your future silence on certain topics." Jason felt Emma's arms tighten around his neck. "No, Daddy, I want to stay with you," she pleaded. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jason assured her, though his heart was breaking. "Remember what we talked about being brave when things get scary?" Emma nodded, her eyes wide. "Like when Mom was sick." "Exactly like that," Jason confirmed. "I need you to be brave now. Go with this man, and I'll come find you very soon. I promise." He looked directly at the security man, his gaze communicating a clear threat despite his gentle words to Emma. "My daughter better arrive safely at Mrs. Peterson's house, completely unharmed, or there won't be anywhere on this earth you can hide from me." The man swallowed visibly, nodding his understanding. Jason turned back to Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," he told her, their special phrase. "I love you more than all the sand on the beach," she replied automatically, completing their ritual. With a final hug, Jason released her, watching as she reluctantly took the security man's outstretched hand. As they left the room, Emma looked back over her shoulder, her eyes meeting his one last time before the door closed between them. The moment Emma was gone, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Grant's false civility dropped away, replaced by cold calculation. "Now then," he said, sitting back in his chair, "let's discuss the terms of your continued existence." "There's nothing to discuss," Jason replied, his posture changing subtly as he gauged distances and angles within the room. "You're going to prison, Grant, for treason, for murder, for experimenting on American soldiers." Grant laughed, genuinely amused. "You still don't understand the world you're living in, do you? Project Ares has support at the highest levels of government. The Pentagon, Congress, even the White House has tacitly approved our work. They understand what's at stake, the next generation of warfare, where our soldiers become the ultimate weapons." "You're insane," Olivia said, speaking for the first time since entering the room. "Those are human beings, not lab rats." "They're assets, Ms. Barnes," Grant corrected her coldly. "Tools to achieve national objectives, just like your father was, just like Mr. Reeves here." Jason's jaw tightened at the casual dismissal of human life. "Is that how you justified killing Captain Barnes? Calling him a tool?" "Captain Barnes was collateral damage in service to a greater cause," Grant replied with a dismissive wave. "As were the others. The data collected from their sacrifices has advanced our research by decades." "And what about the soldiers still suffering from your research?" Olivia demanded. "The ones dying slowly from organ failure and cancer?" Grant's expression hardened. "War has always had casualties, Ms. Barnes. Your father understood that, even if he ultimately lacked the vision to see the bigger picture." As Grant spoke, Jason was aware of movement outside, the faint sounds of approaching forces that his trained ears detected even through the warehouse walls. Martinez's warning about new players entering the field was materializing. "Enough talk," the ghost interrupted, his professional assessment of the situation apparently reaching the same conclusion as Jason's. "We need to move, sir. Now." Grant nodded, standing. "Indeed, I'm afraid our time together has come to an end, Mr. Reeves, Ms. Barnes. The ghost will ensure you're never in a position to threaten Project Ares again." He gathered the evidence from his desk, placing it in a secure briefcase. "A shame, really. Your skills could have been valuable to our program, Mr. Reeves. Your daughter as well, in time." The mention of Emma in connection with Project Ares sent a surge of rage through Jason. Before he could act on it, the warehouse was suddenly plunged into darkness as the power was cut. In the same instant, the window shattered as stun grenades exploded throughout the building. "Martinez, now!" Jason shouted into his comm, grabbing Olivia and pulling her down behind the desk as the room erupted in chaos. The ghost moved with lightning speed, drawing his weapon and firing toward the door as shadowy figures breached the room. Grant ducked behind a filing cabinet, clutching the briefcase containing the evidence. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, the muzzle flashes providing strobe-like illumination of the unfolding battle. Jason kept Olivia close, using the confusion to maneuver around the desk toward Grant. "Stay down," he instructed her as he moved, his focus entirely on the briefcase and the man holding it. Through the chaos, Jason could make out Martinez leading a team through the main door, engaging the ghost in a firefight that demonstrated why both men had earned their elite reputations. But it was the second team, the new players Martinez had warned about, that caught Jason's attention as they rappelled through the windows. Their tactical gear was unmarked, their movements disciplined and coordinated. Not Grant's men, but not standard law enforcement either. As one of them passed near Jason's position, a flash of recognition hit him. The man's face was familiar, one of Tom's friends from outside the SEAL teams. DCIS, Jason realized aloud. Tom's people, the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. The undercover operation Tom had mentioned was real, and now they were executing a raid to capture Grant and secure the evidence. Using the cover provided by the two-pronged assault, Jason closed in on Grant, who was attempting to escape through a side door with the briefcase. With a burst of speed, Jason tackled him, sending them both crashing to the floor. The briefcase skidded away across the concrete. Grant fought with surprising strength for a man of his age and occupation, landing a solid punch to Jason's jaw before reaching into his jacket. Jason caught a glint of metal, a concealed pistol, and reacted instantly, grabbing Grant's wrist and slamming it against the floor until the weapon clattered away. "It's over, Grant," Jason growled, pinning the older man beneath him. "Your project, your freedom, all of it." Grant's face contorted with rage and then unexpectedly shifted to a smile. "You think this ends with me? I'm just one node in a network that spans governments, corporations, military branches. Cut me off, and two more will take my place." "Maybe," Jason acknowledged, pulling Grant to his feet and securing his hands behind his back with zip ties. "But you won't be around to see it." As the gunfire died down, emergency lights kicked on, casting the warehouse in an eerie red glow. The ghost lay wounded but alive, surrounded by Martinez's team. Grant's other men had either fled, been captured, or were down. The DCIS team was securing the scene with professional efficiency. Olivia emerged from cover, retrieving the briefcase containing their evidence. Her face was smudged with dust, but her eyes shone with the fire of victory. "Jason," she called, pointing toward the main entrance, where a familiar figure was striding in, flanked by federal agents. "Look." Tom Davis entered the warehouse, no longer playing the role of Grant's enforcer. He wore a tactical vest with DCIS clearly marked, his bearing that of a man in command. His eyes met Jason's across the room, a mixture of relief and apprehension in his gaze. "You made it," Tom said as he approached. "I wasn't sure my message about the ghost would get through in time." "Almost didn't," Jason replied, still not entirely ready to trust his former teammate despite the evidence of his true allegiance surrounding them. "You've got a lot of explaining to do, Tom." Tom nodded, accepting the weight of years of deception. 3 years undercover, tracking Project Ares from the inside. I couldn't tell anyone, not even you. Especially not you after what happened to Captain Barnes. "You let us believe you were working for Grant," Olivia interjected, her tone accusatory despite the clear evidence that Tom was on their side. "I had to," Tom replied simply. "My cover was too important to risk. We knew Grant was just one part of a larger conspiracy. We needed to identify all the players." He turned to Jason, his expression grave. "I never knew about the ambush in Afghanistan. That wasn't part of the plan. When I realized what had happened, what they'd done to our team, to Captain Barnes," he trailed off, the weight of his complicity, however unwitting, evident in his voice. Before Jason could respond, Martinez joined them, his tactical gear showing signs of the recent firefight. "Building secure," he reported. "Grant's men are either in custody or fled." "The evidence?" Olivia held up the briefcase. "All here, plus what we found at Dr. Winter's hiding place." Martinez nodded with satisfaction. "Good. DCIS has a secure transport waiting to take it directly to the Justice Department. This ends tonight. Emma? Jason asked, his thoughts returning to his daughter now that the immediate threat was contained. Safe, Martinez assured him. I had a team intercept Grant's man before they left the warehouse perimeter. She's waiting for you outside. Relief washed over Jason, the tension of the past days finally beginning to ease. It wasn't over. The legal battles, the testimony, the exposure of Project Ares would take months, perhaps years. But the immediate danger had passed, and Emma was safe. Outside the warehouse, emergency vehicles were arriving, their lights painting the night in flashes of red and blue. Federal agents swarmed the area, securing evidence and taking statements. In the midst of it all, sitting on the tailgate of an SUV with a blanket around her shoulders and a hot chocolate in her hands, was Emma. "Daddy!" she cried when she saw him, jumping down and running toward him. Jason swept her up in his arms, holding her tightly as if he might never let go again. "Hey, princess," he murmured into her hair. "You okay?" Emma nodded against his shoulder. "I was brave, just like you said to be." "The bravest," Jason agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Braver than any SEAL I ever knew." Olivia approached cautiously, not wanting to intrude on their reunion. Emma spotted her and smiled, reaching out a hand. "Miss Olivia, you came too." Olivia took the small hand in hers, smiling through tears of relief. "Of course I did. We're a team, remember?" The three of them stood together in the chaos of the raid's aftermath, a small island of connection amidst the professional activity surrounding them. Tom approached after a few minutes, his expression cautious. "Jason," he began, "I know you have questions. I owe you answers." Jason studied his former teammate, weighing the years of friendship against the years of deception. Later, he decided, right now I just want to take my daughter home. Tom nodded in understanding. "The DCIS will need statements from both of you, but it can wait until tomorrow. Grant's not going anywhere, and neither is the evidence." As if on cue, federal agents led Maxwell Grant past them toward a waiting vehicle. The once powerful CEO was diminished now, his expensive suit dusty and torn, his hands cuffed behind his back. He paused when he saw Jason, his expression a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "This isn't over, Reeves," he said quietly. "Men like me don't stay in prison." Jason met his gaze steadily, Emma still in his arms. "For what you've done, for Captain Barnes, for Dr. Winters, for all those soldiers, yes, you will." Grant's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won, but you've only scratched the surface. Project Ares has roots you can't imagine. The work will continue, with or without me." "Maybe," Jason acknowledged, "but not today. And not with you." He turned away, dismissing Grant as the agents led him to their vehicle. "He's just trying to scare us," Olivia said as they watched the car drive away. "Standard intimidation tactic." "Maybe," Jason repeated, though something in Grant's confidence troubled him. That was a problem for tomorrow, however. Tonight was for Emma, for safety, for the first real breath he'd taken since this all began. They made arrangements with Tom and Martinez for the next day's statements, then left the scene in one of the DCIS vehicles, headed back to Oak Ridge in what remained of their interrupted lives. 6 months later, Jason stood in a federal courthouse, watching as the judge delivered Maxwell Grant's sentence. Multiple life terms, no possibility of parole, the punishment fitting the crimes of treason, murder, illegal human experimentation, and a dozen other charges. The evidence Olivia had assembled, combined with Dr. Winter's documentation and Cameron Hayes' testimony, had created an airtight case even Grant's expensive legal team couldn't dismantle. The investigation had expanded well beyond Grant himself, reaching into the Pentagon, defense contractors, and even Congress. Project Ares had been officially terminated, its research confiscated, and its test subjects identified for medical treatment and compensation. The system had worked, however imperfectly, however belatedly. Olivia stood beside Jason in the courtroom, her hand finding his as the sentence was read. Her legal expertise had been instrumental in navigating the complex case, ensuring that no technicality or procedural error would give Grant an escape route. The prosecutor had even offered her a position with the Justice Department, recognizing her skill and dedication. As they left the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, cameras flashing in the spring sunshine. Olivia handled them with practiced ease, giving just enough information to satisfy their hunger for headlines without compromising the ongoing investigations into Project Ares' wider network. "Is it really over?" Jason asked as they walked down the courthouse steps, away from the media frenzy. Olivia considered the question seriously. "Grant is finished, the project is shut down, the soldiers affected are getting treatment and compensation." She squeezed his hand. "So yes, this part is over, but the work of preventing the next Project Ares, that continues." Jason nodded, understanding her meaning. The fundamental dynamics that had allowed Project Ares to exist, the prioritization of military advantage over human rights, the corruption of oversight processes, the culture of secrecy, remained largely intact. Today's victory was significant but not comprehensive. "Then we keep working," he said simply. They reached Jason's truck, parked a block from the courthouse to avoid the media. Emma was waiting for them at Olivia's house, looked after by Mrs. Peterson, while they attended the sentencing. In the months since the warehouse raid, the three of them had formed a new kind of family, not replacing what each had lost, but building something new from the shared experience of trauma and recovery. Olivia's house had become their sanctuary, the art room Emma's special domain where she processed her experiences through painting. Jason had started a small business combining his plumbing skills with security consulting for veterans, helping them protect their homes while also finding employment for former service members struggling to transition to civilian life. They had healed together, finding in each other the support needed to face both past losses and future challenges. Captain Barnes and Laura were still honored, still mourned, but no longer ghosts haunting every moment of happiness. As they drove back to Oak Ridge, to Emma, to the life they were building, Jason reflected on the strange journey that had led him here. From Navy SEAL to small-town plumber to reluctant hero and back to something in between, a man who had finally stopped running from his past without being consumed by it. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, noticing his contemplative silence. "Second chances," Jason replied honestly. "How sometimes the path forward isn't what you expected." Olivia smiled, understanding perfectly. "My father used to say that the truest navigation isn't about finding your way back to where you started, but about discovering where you're actually meant to be." "Smart man, your father," Jason said, returning her smile. "He would have liked you," Olivia told him. "Not just because you were a good soldier, but because you understand what really matters." What really mattered was waiting for them at home, a little girl with paint-stained fingers in her mother's eyes, a child who had faced monsters both real and imagined, and emerged with her capacity for joy intact. Emma had taught Jason what Captain Barnes had tried to show him years ago, that true strength came not from standing alone, but from finding the right people to stand with. When they arrived home, Emma was in the front yard with Mrs. Peterson, planting flowers in the spring soil. Her face lit up at the sight of them, and she ran to meet their truck, eager to hear the news. "Did the bad man go to jail?" she asked, her understanding of the complex case reduced to the simple elements an 8-year-old could grasp. "Yes, sweetheart," Jason assured her, lifting her into his arms. "He's going to be in jail for a very long time." Emma nodded solemnly. "Good, he hurt a lot of people." "He did," Olivia agreed, joining them. "But now he can't hurt anyone else, and the people he did hurt are getting help." Emma seemed satisfied with this resolution, her attention already shifting to more immediate concerns. "I planted sunflowers. Mrs. Peterson says they'll grow taller than you, Daddy." "Is that so?" Jason asked, setting her down so she could lead them to her gardening project. As Emma excitedly explained her planting technique, Jason caught Olivia's eye over their daughter's head. The shared look contained all they didn't need to say aloud: gratitude for their survival, acknowledgement of the path still ahead, and the quiet joy of building something worth protecting. Captain Barnes had saved Jason's life in Afghanistan, but Olivia had saved something even more important: his ability to live that life fully, to be not just Emma's protector, but her example of how to move forward after loss. The three of them continued their tour of Emma's garden, their voices mingling with the spring breeze as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, testimony to give, systems to reform, healing still to do. But today, in this moment, they were simply a family finding their way together, planting seeds for a future they would grow together. In the distance, DiNapoli's restaurant was preparing for the Friday night crowd, their table by the window reserved as always. Some traditions were worth preserving, even as new ones took root alongside them. Life moved forward, not in a straight line, but in a series of unexpected turns that sometimes, if you were lucky, led you exactly where you needed to be.